Time having arrived, I hereby call the Finance Committee meeting to order for Monday, August 21st, 2017. Councilors, before we get into the agenda tonight, there's a couple pieces of information, but before that, I'd like to recognize Councilor Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take a minute. Since we met last, the city lost a real supporter, someone who was never actually an elected official in the city, but those of us who are elected officials know that our families many times a big part of what we do, and a great supporter of her husband, former Mayor Cal Pitaro. Pat Pitaro died recently, and I wanted to ask this council to have a moment of silence for her. Thank you, Council. Councilors, our thoughts and prayers with the Pitaro family, and before we go into the agenda item, we actually lost two other individuals that proud Brocktonians, to say the least. Ward 4 resident Robert Bob Jebson, of course, retired firefighter. Yes. We all know Bob and Ginny Jebson, and we lost Bob. And also Phyllis Keating, Ward 1 resident. If you knew Phyllis, you know, at the Council on Aging at the Rock Stadium, she was a firecracker. So if we could just remember both Bob and Phyllis for a moment, please. Thoughts and prayers are with them. Councilors, being in the summer session, just to let you know again, as you know, the way that we work, we will continue to be in summer session in the month of September. The conclusion of September, we go into regular schedule, meaning we'll meet every Monday night. First and third, finance; second and fourth, full city council. However, out of respect for some of the councilors that have a preliminary, we've done this past practice, the next time we would be scheduled to meet as a finance committee meeting would be Monday the 18th of September. However, as chair of the committee, I am going to ask that we meet on Wednesday, which would be a day after the preliminary. As a councilor at large, Moses and Wynn and myself, unfortunately, we're not on the preliminary, but some of our colleagues are, and I have been asked, and I'm going to honor that. So again, for your records and your calendars, please remember the next Finance Committee meeting will be on Wednesday, September 20th. We did get some correspondence, very late, to say the least, 4:05 p.m. this afternoon from Mayor Carpenter. Sent me an email as President of the Council saying he would not join us tonight at Finance Committee meeting. So we will look at this when we look at the agenda items relative to him. And also, a few weeks ago, myself and the clerk of the Finance Committee did get an email relative to agenda item 22. Actually, it was 23, I'm sorry. Jean Martineau, which was Council Beauregard's resolve. She's on vacation. She is more than willing and happy to come before us at a later date. So when we get to 23, Council, you want to postpone that matter. I think that's it for now. We're going to move into the agenda item number 1, please, Madam Clerk.
Order that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out and acceptance of Delmar Road from Dagmar Drive to Dodge Road, a distance of 984.17 feet, and for that purpose it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way. Invited, Lawrence Rowley, DPW Commissioner; Howard B. Newton, DPW Superintendent of Engineering.
Commissioner, how are you this evening?
I'm well, thank you. Councilors, we don't have any objections to this becoming a public way.
Excellent. And this is Councilor Lally, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Any questions for the Commissioner relative to this? We're going to open it up as a public hearing.
Okay.
Yes. Time having arrived, I'm going to declare the hearing open. We know that Mr. Rowley is here in favor. Anyone else is in favor is going to come forward to the podium, and then we'll get to anybody not in favor. Is anyone else in favor relative to this matter? Third and final. Anyone here in the chamber tonight in favor of this? I'm going to close that part of the hearing. Anyone here in opposition relative to this agenda item? Anyone here in opposition? Third and final time. Anyone in opposition relative to this this layout, Delmar from Dagmar to Dodge Road? Seeing none, that part of the hearing is closed as well. Councilor Lally.
Motion recommend favorably.
Second.
Favorable recommendation back to the full council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the full council. Thank you, council. We're going to go on to number 2, please.
Order that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out and acceptance of Fortin Drive, extending from Dixon Road northerly, a distance of about 650 feet, and for that purpose it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way. Invited, Lawrence Rowley, DPW Commissioner; Howard B. Newton, DPW Supervisor Engineer.
Again, council, is a public hearing. Time haven't arrived. I'm going to declare this public hearing open. Anyone here in favor, please state your name for the clerk.
Lawrence Raleigh, DPW Commissioner. We have no objections to this becoming a public way.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Anyone else here in favor? Third and final time. Anyone here in the chamber in favor relative to this agenda item matter? That part of the hearing is closed. Anyone here in opposition? Please come forward.
I just would like, excuse me, thank you.
Sir, are you in opposition to this matter?
No, I'm not in opposition, I'm just trying to get a better understanding. As I live on 39 Fortin Drive, I'm trying to know what it, I see the letter, I have the letter, but it's not in layman's terms, it's in engineering terms. I'd like to know what it means, when it's going to happen, and what's going to happen. Is there someone here that can explain that?
Councilor Lally.
I'm sorry. I try to hand out my own version of that letter. I either left it in your door or I handed it to someone at the house.
I have it.
You have it?
Yes.
With my letterhead, not the city's?
Correct.
Okay. So what this is a private way is owned by the residents of the road and not the city of Brockton. Legally, it does not have to be plowed. It does not have to have potholes fixed or anything like that.
And I only recently found that out.
And it is not eligible to be paved. You pay the same taxes, fees, and bills as everyone else in the city of Brockton, but you don't get the same fair shake. You don't have the same chances. It's not right, and it is something that the council is working to address by doing these hearings and making as many of these private ways public as possible. This is not to pave the road. I cannot promise anything about paving the road. The best I can say is hopefully it's done before I die.
You're young enough.
But we can...
A long time.
We can, hopefully. But we can at least promise that the road is made eligible. We can promise you get the same opportunity as everyone else and that you're given the same chances. Your tax dollars go the same distance.
That sounds good, but is there a time frame? Is this years away, weeks away, or
Making the road public or paving the road?
both?
Paving the road, there's no time assigned to that. It's hopefully it could be done, before I die. It's really the best I can promise. In terms of making the road public, we will vote tonight and we will vote next week at the formal council meeting. And assuming it passes next week, which I'm confident it will. Assuming it passes, the road will then become a public way, and that happens.
And does that mean that then one side of the road is going to have sidewalks and telephone poles moved and the sewer covers moved?
Nothing will change. Nothing will change.
Oh.
You'll wake up the next day and it will be the exact same road, but now you are legally protected as a city
And
street.
at some point way down the road, it might be paved?
It becomes eligible.
Okay. That's fine. That's all I was looking for. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Lally, thank you. Another piece of information on that is the city of Brockton does plow it, as Councilor Lally said. We get Commonwealth of Massachusetts funding, Chapter 90 funding. We don't get, the city of Brockton does not get its fair share when we plow private way. I live on a private way on the west side. So public ways are beneficial, not just to the residents, because again, you could pave it down the road, but also for a financial standpoint, the city of Brockton, because then we can add that to the Commonwealth's criteria for funding reimbursement back.
And I also want to touch upon, while I have the opportunity, I want to thank the DPW for working with us on this matter. They are well aware of our infrastructure problems, especially in Ward 6 on the east side, where a lot of the roads have really been just left to sit there for upwards of 60 years. So it really is, they're doing as Councilor Sullivan would say, yeoman's work, and doing everything they can.
When you're as old as me, I mean, you're going to live a long time, kid, so you'll be all right. Anyone here in opposition, second time, third and final time? Anyone here in opposition about this agenda item? Seeing none, that part of the hearing is closed. Councilor Lally, to you, please.
Motion to recommend favorably.
So motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to the council. If you're in favor of that, please raise your hand. If you're opposed, Raise your hand, motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the council. Number 3, Madam Clerk, please.
Order that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out and acceptance of Maplewood Circle from North Carey Street easterly, and for that purpose, it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way. Invited Lawrence Rowley, DPW Commissioner, Howard B. Newton, DPW Superintendent Commissioner.
Again, time having arrived, I'm going to declare the hearing open. If there's anyone here in favor, please state your name for the clerk.
Lawrence Rowley, DPW Commissioner. We have no objections to making this a public way.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Anyone else here in favor? Third and final time, anyone here in favor? That part of the hearing is closed. Anyone here in opposition about Maplewood Circle? Anyone here in opposition? Third and final time, it's closed. Council Lally.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion on the floor, property second. It's a favorable recommendation back to the full council. If you're in favor of that, please raise your hand. If you're opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries. Thank you for that, Council Lally. Going to go on to agenda item number 4, Madam Clerk.
Appointment of Lawrence Siskind of 51 Briarcliff Road, Brockton, as an alternate to the Brockton License Commission for a 3-year term. Invited Lawrence Siskind.
Attorney Siskin, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good. Do you have a statement for the chairman of the committee?
I don't really have a statement, but, you know, I've been very much involved in all of the city matters for many years, and I think this gives me an opportunity to be a further service, and I would look forward to serving at this position.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion on the floor, favorable recommendation back to the full council. All in favor? All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Number 5, please.
Appointment of Mildred McCohen of 612 East Street, Brockton, to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited Mildred McCohen.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you? Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. Do you have a statement for the committee?
No, I don't. I just would like to thank the committee for considering me.
Move for a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. We'll take a vote on it at the next meeting. Thank you, ma'am. Going to go on to number 6, please.
Appointment of David Andrews of 124 Clifton Ave, Brockton, as an alternate to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited David Andrews.
Good evening, Mr. Andrews. How are you?
Good evening, I'm well, and yourself?
Good. Thanks for joining us tonight. Do you have a statement for the committee?
No, really, I just appreciate the...
Move for favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Going to go on to the next item, please.
Appointment of Carol Delory of 19 North Bassett Road, Brockton, to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited Carol Delory.
Good evening, Ms. Delory. How are you?
Just fine. Nice to see all of you again.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
Okay, thanks.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to council. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Favorable recommendation back to full council. Number 8, please.
Appointment of Clayton Reichenberg, Jr. of 115 Darren Drive, Brockton, as an alternate to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited Clayton Reichenberg, Jr.
Good evening, Clay. How are you?
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Thank you for being here. Any statement?
No, as you all know, I've been involved with the COA for some time, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue
Move
that.
favorable. Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Favorable back to the full council. Number 9, please.
Appointment of Joan Madden of 96A Earl Street, Brockton, as an alternate to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited Joan Madden.
Ms. Madden, good evening. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thanks
Fine,
for-
thank you. How are you?
Good, thanks. Do you have a statement for us, or?
No, I'm just proud
Move
of
to
you.
recommend favorably.
favorably.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor? All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you very much. We're going to go on to the next agenda item, please.
Appointment of Barbara A. Fox of 55 Emery Street, Brockton, to the Brockton Council on Aging for a 3-year term. Invited, Barbara A. Fox.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you have a statement?
No, but I'm looking forward to working with the Council on Aging, and thank you for requesting.
Move for favorable recommendation.
Second.
Motion on the floor, properly second, favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the council. Number 11, Madam Clerk.
Appointment of Jeffrey A. Thompson of 45 Ames Road, Brockton, to the Brockton Zoning Board of Appeals, replacing Edelyn Jeffrey Charnell for a 3-year term. Invited, Jeffrey A. Thompson.
Mr. Thompson, good evening.
Good evening.
Do you have a statement for the committee?
Just quickly,
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Finance Committee. I was before this committee a little less than a year ago, seeking your approval to my appointment to the Brockton Licensing Commission. This committee did unanimously approve that appointment. I want to take this time to thank Chairman Tattaglia for his leadership, Commissioners Morrow, Marion, and DeAndre, and Lieutenant LaGrice for their professionalism and their dedication to this city. I hope to bring the experience that I gained on the Licensing Commission and my experience as an attorney to the Brockton Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm confident I can make a positive contribution to the ZBA. I'd also like to thank the mayor for his continued confidence in me and for granting me another opportunity to serve this city. Therefore, I do respectfully request that this committee approve my appointment to the Brockton Zoning Board of Appeals.
Move for favorable
Thank you.
recommendation.
On the motion,
On the motion, Councilor.
hi, Attorney Thompson.
Yes,
I just had a question. So you have your own law firm now?
that is correct.
Okay, and what type of law do you practice?
I'm a general practice attorney, but I specialize in a few fields, mostly divorce, personal injury, landlord-tenant, and immigration.
Oh, okay. And what's your background or your, I guess, experience with land maps, plots, things like that?
No professional experience. I am familiar with Chapter 40, and I've got up to date on some of the reading materials that the city sent me. So I have experience in reading law, applying facts to law. So I believe it's that experience that will serve me on the zoning board.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded, a favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor? All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you, Attorney Thompson.
Thank you.
Going on to number 12, please, and we're going to ask the invited guests to clarify the address. Thank you.
Appointment of Donald Williams of 1342 Belmont Street, Brockton, to the Brockton Community Cable Television Board for a 3-year term. Invited, Donald Williams.
Attorney Williams, good evening.
Good evening.
I know that's your law office.
Right, we did change the, well,
Yeah.
it's
Was it
clerk's office
what
called.
was it again,
151
Rockland? Was it-
Yeah, 151 Rockland Drive.
Thank you very much. Any statement for the committee?
Just briefly, that I was approved for the advisory council, for the cable advisory months ago, but that has been, it was found that I should have been appointed to this, so that's why it got changed, and that's why I'm here now.
Motion to recommend favorably.
On the motion? Oh,
We have Council Rodriguez, followed by Council Barnes.
Council Barnes first.
You're a gentleman.
Yeah, I'm trying.
Council Barnes, please.
well, I really didn't have a whole lot to contribute, but just to say that this is one of my favorite cousins, my cousin Bobby. He's a great man, and he's going to do exceptional, as he has in the past in his career, and just in the community of Brockton, and on the other boards that he served on. He's going to really bring something special to this board.
Thank you, Councilor. Council Rodriguez, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're not my favorite cousin because I think we're related, right? But we could be. You know how it is. I just actually have a quick question, and it has to do with the Cable Advisory Board. As you know, we're in the middle of renewals for the contract with Comcast.
Right.
But it has, based on my understanding, is that board hasn't really met to go over preparations for this contract negotiation. Is anything you can shed on this since you're a member of that committee?
Well, my understanding is that when I was last appointed, it was to the advisory board, which is separate.
No, I'm talking about the advisory board.
Well,
BCA is a quasi-agency that has nothing to do technically with the city, other than the fact that we make the appointments. But the Cable Advisory Board is the body that negotiates or renegotiates the contract with Comcast, which provides funding back to BCA.
okay, there was another cable board that I was approved of before. It was not this one.
I know, but that's the one I'm asking you whether or not you guys had met and discussed.
No, I have not. I haven't met because I was appointed to the wrong board.
Okay. And to your knowledge, that contract has...
I think it's still, my understanding is it still has to be negotiated. It has, and I don't know at what level they are in negotiations because I have yet to be appointed to that particular board that has the contract that's dealing with the contract negotiations.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if you allow me, when the solicitor comes up for something, would you allow me to ask him a question with regards to that contract, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. White.
Any other questions for Attorney Williams?
No, I'm sorry, also.
Any questions for Attorney Williams? Is there a motion? It was a motion,
Motion
right?
to recommend
It was already a motion.
The
favorable.
motion was properly seconded, a favorable recommendation back to the council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Going to go on to number 13, please.
Appointment of Adeline Jeffrey Charnell of 30 Foster Street, Brockton, Mass., as an alternate to the Brockton License Commission for a 3-year term. Invited, Adeline Jeffrey Charnell.
Mr. Charnell, good evening. Good evening. First of all, we want to thank you as a council on behalf of your endeavors for ZBA member. You were on there for a long time, so thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any statement relative to this appointment matter?
No, I served with many other members on the ZBA. It was a great opportunity. I'm looking forward to the next opportunity to serve as an alternate on the Licensing Commission.
Move for favorable
recommend
recommendation.
favorable.
On the motion,
Council Cruz.
I just actually want to take a moment. I was going to say this when Mr. Thompson was up. I hope Mr. Thompson can sit and talk with you and take some lessons. You have done a great job. As somebody who's been 12 years going to zoning board meetings, you've been one of the most thorough, fair members I think I've ever dealt with there, and I wanted to mention that, and I hope you do the same thing on the new board, which I know you will, but...
Thank you, Councilor Cruz.
I second that.
On the motion?
Council.
Just also too, and I don't know if anybody knows, but Jeffrey...
Your cousin as well, or?
No, but Jeffrey...
Don't spread rumors, please.
He wants to be my cousin. Jeffrey is an avid golfer, and he in his capacity as a banker in 2 separate organizations, make sure that they give back to the community in different ways, different golf tournaments, and I just want to thank him too for also engaging his employers and the people around him into making sure that Brockton gets its right due and get any kind of funding available. A strong advocate for the city of Brockton.
Thank you,
And
Council.
my golf partner.
Thank you, Council. So motion on the floor, properly second, favorable recommendation back to council. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, that motion carries. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Going to go on to number 14, please.
Order appropriation of $479,000 from Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division to City of Brockton DPW Massachusetts Department of Transportation Highway Division Fund. Invited Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Larry Rowley, DPW Commissioner.
Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, councilors. Councilors, this money is going to be used for the rebuilding of the West Elm Street Bridge, just opposite the Manning Tower, which we discovered when we did the total reconstruction of West Elm Street. We started exposing some of the sidewalks in that area, and they had a lot of holes in it. So the state at that time had a small bridge fund that we applied for, we received, and right now, it's only going to cost the city $23,000, but that's coming out of Chapter 90 money, so it's not costing the taxpayers anything. And right now, it's in the engineering phase. So I'm hoping to start this probably early next year, in the spring.
Any questions? Councilor Cruz.
I just questioned, so you answered one of them early next spring, you're hoping. How long do you think it'll take? And how much disruption? Will the road have to be closed?
Well, it's probably going to be a 3 to 4 month project. The road could be closed, but it's all on the contractor. He may work with one lane open, or he may request to have it closed. I just assume keep it open because of the 3 schools surrounding there and the Manning high rise there. So we're going to work with them to try to keep at least one lane open, but if it becomes to a public safety issue, then we're going to have to close it.
If it gets closed, it wouldn't have to be closed that whole 3-month period or anything like that.
It may be. It may be on and off. I know it's a long time.
So we may have to
we're going to
look
try
into-
not to close it, but I'm just...
We may have to look into making Goddard Road a two-way road for a time or something like that.
You know, we're going to request a traffic study on this anyway. My thoughts are, I didn't want to start it now because of snow coming, and I'd really like to start it maybe sometime in May, when the schools close, in June, July, August. Hopefully we can get it open in September.
Okay.
But we'd be able to get, you know, you have the registry of deeds there, and then you have the Manning Tower. They'd be able to get in and out of there. It's going to close from coming in off of
Warren Ave.
Warren Ave, yeah.
And coming
That's
into
going to kind of mess traffic up.
Right.
From heading west, coming off of
I
Warren
mean, it has to
Ave.
be done, but that's going to be a real headache coming
Yeah.
into downtown and out of downtown.
So it'll be all on the contractor, what he would prefer, because we don't want anybody getting hurt either, so.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council, any other questions for the Commissioner? I entertain a motion.
Recommend favorably.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to full council. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go on to number 15, please.
Order appropriation of $1,000 from Gang Resistance Education and Training GREAT Foundation Grant to City of Brockton Police Department Gang Resistance Education and Training GREAT Foundation Grant Fund. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, John Crowley, Chief, Brockton Police Department.
Condon.
Move favorable recommendation.
Second.
I wanted to know if Chief Crowley was here. Is the chief in attendance today? Seeing none. There's a motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to council. All in favor? All opposed? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries. Favorable recommendation back to council. Thank you. 16, please.
Order appropriation of $5,000 from 2016 SHSP grant to City of Brockton Emergency Management 2016 SHSP Grant Fund. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Stephen Hook Jr., Director, Brockton Emergency Management Agency.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members. This is a no-match CERT grant for our Community Emergency Response Team, equipment and training.
Move to recommend favorably.
Second.
On the motion?
Council on the motion.
Again, with Mr. Hook, we'd be remiss if we didn't say you always do a great job with really marginal resources, and we're all pulling for you, no hurricanes this year.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councilor.
There's a motion on the floor, properly seconded, favorable recommendation back to full council. If you favor that, please raise your hand. If you're opposed, raise your hand. Motion carries. It's a favorable recommendation back to the council. We're going to go on to 17, please.
Order appropriation of $10,000 from Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation to City of Brockton Public Library Eastern Bank Charitable Foundation Grant Fund. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, John A. Condon, Chief Financial Officer, Paul Engel, Director, Brockton Public Library.
Good evening, Mr. Engel. How are you?
Good evening. Good, thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a $10,000 grant to seed the Immigrant Dialogue Series, which will be starting in September.
Move to recommend favorably.
On the motion.
Second.
Council Barnes on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to be clear. You spoke about this program before, that this was coming, and is this the one that Malise will be kind of the director of, coordinating? Okay.
Yes.
All right, and now do you have people to, you have a waiting list, or have you started advertising for people to come into this program yet?
Malise has secured several, I think 6 speakers so far.
Okay.
The only one that I'm willing to talk about is the first speaker will be Mayor Carpenter.
Okay.
The other ones we're just holding off on until we get clarification and iron out the details.
Sure.
It's going to be a really good program. The whole series is going to be great.
Super, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? There's a motion on the floor. It was seconded. Favorable recommendation back to council. All in favor? All opposed? Our motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Engel. Favorable recommendation back to the council. If we could go on to the next agenda item, please.
Order. In reference to Article 3, Section 2-110, City of Brockton Ordinance Waiver of Residency. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, Philip C. Nasrallah, Solicitor, John Crowley, Chief, Brockton Police Department, Patrick Benvey.
Mr. Chairman?
Council Farwell.
Mr. Chairman, this item was accompanied by some backup material, which I have read, and I've done some preliminary research. I'm going to move to postpone this to a meeting in September or October, subject to your call. This has some collective bargaining implications, and it may have a ripple effect across other collective bargaining agreements other than the police department. And I think it's something that we should have our legislative counsel examine so that we know exactly what we're doing if we do something, or conversely, is it something that perhaps we shouldn't be involved in because it is so tied to collective bargaining. So motion to postpone to September, October, subject to the call of the chair.
Yeah,
Prior to the motions, please, I'd have some questions I'd like to ask maybe Attorney Nazrella before we have the motion on the floor then, because we've done this before, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, but also as the chair, the fact that the mayor and the chief aren't here, I mean, they're invited guests, they have a lot of valuable information. And in the past, when we considered a waiver, those parties came before us, Counselor. They're not here tonight.
They didn't the last time we did it.
Well, they're not here tonight. As the chair, I'm gonna honor that. It's on the floor right now. Is there a second on that?
Yes.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor. It's probably second to postpone it. I will say to September. I don't want to wait till October, but I do believe legislative council, our legislative council needs to look at it. And if the parties don't appear, we're going to postpone it again. All in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Motion carries. It's going to be postponed to the only finance committee we have in the month of September. Going to go on to the 19, please.
Order that the naming of Somerset Place also be known as Reverend Nathaniel E. Williams Place. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter.
I brought
Councilor
this.
Barnes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I brought this forward as a resolve, and my cousin left, actually, that's his father, Bishop Williams, is my cousin Donnie's father, and we spoke about it, spoke to the family about it. They're on board for having it go forward today if the council is willing to allow it to go, and then we will discuss with DPW about signage and all those things at a later date, if that's your fancy.
Move to recommend favorably.
Well, I want to hold on the motion. The fact that the mayor's not here, did he have any invaluable information to provide relative to this matter? He's the only invited guest.
I didn't consult with him when drafting the resolve. To be honest, I don't even know why he's on here.
Councilor Farwell.
Yeah, just without any objection at this point, I think we ought to have something read into the record about Reverend Williams and his background, and I have to admit, I'm not familiar with him, but I think for the benefit of the public, we ought to do that, if we're going to name a street after someone.
Well, I think as chair, I also will postpone. I mean, I'm not opposed to this. I too don't know the back history, but the fact that the invited guest isn't here as well, I think we need to postpone it. And we can honor your request, Council. We can get that information. It gives us time. Again, I would, as chair, like to say that we do this next month. I don't want to go farther out due to the fact that Councilor Barnes won't be with us at the next legislative session. So we want to at least honor her request and do our due diligence relative to that matter as well. And if you don't believe the mayor should be invited, we can delete him. But since he's on the agenda item now, I think we have to honor that.
Okay, I accept that. Thank you.
Is there a motion to postpone until September?
Motion postponed until September.
Second.
So motion on the floor, properly second, favorable recommendation, favor, to postpone until next month. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed, it's going to carry. We're going to postpone it until September. We will, Madam Clerk, we will converse with Councilor Barnes relative to this, and we also will get that information as requested by Councilor Farwell.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
With respect to the agenda, at this point, I would like to move that we take item 26 next out of professional courtesy. I believe we have a couple of state officials here from the MWRA, and rather than have them remain through the rest of the agenda, I think it would be appropriate to have them come forward next.
I concur with that, Council, due to the fact that I know some of these people actually travel from Boston and beyond to come here tonight. So there is a motion to take agenda item 26 out of order. All in favor of that? All opposed? That's going to carry. We're going to take agenda item 26 out of order, Madam Clerk.
Resolve that a representative of the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, MWRA, be invited to appear before the Finance Committee and explain the issues, timing, and estimated associated costs relative to the City of Brockton potentially connecting to their service at a future date. Invited, Fred Lasky, Executive Director, MWRA, Joseph Favaloro, Executive Director, MWRA Advisory Board, Pamela Heidel, Sean Navin.
Good evening. Thank you so much for coming. If you just state your name for the record.
Good evening.
Pam Heidel.
And Sean Navin.
Thank you very much for being here. Councilors, this is a resolve that was filed jointly by myself and Council Farwell relative to doing our homework and our research relative to the MWRA. I'm not going to speak on it right now. I will confer and pass it on to my brother, Council Farwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to both of you for being here. You received the invitation because Brockton is currently studying alternative water resources other than Silver Lake. And as you probably know, we do have an Aquaria water plant, and we have a water service agreement with them. Our primary source is Silver Lake. My guess is we probably consume between 10 and 12 million gallons a day. If anything were to happen to Silver Lake, either an environmental issue or man-made issue, and that was not available to us, 3.9 million gallons would not be sufficient to supply the city of Brockton with the water resource it needs. And any due diligence obviously should include the MWRA, because you have quite a footprint over Massachusetts in terms of communities that have just water resources with you, communities that have just sewer resources with you, and then communities that have both a combined water and sewer relationship with you. So I think I'd like to start off just by having each of you, we'll start with Ms. Heidel, just again introduce yourself. How long have you been with the agency and what do you do there? And then I have some specific questions.
Okay, well, I have been with MWRA for 28 years, quite a while. I'm a policy and planning manager. I have varied responsibilities, and one of them has been when communities are interested in water or sewer services from MWRA. That's one of my responsibilities. And I manage water contracts, and I also address fine people like yourselves.
Okay. And
Yeah, and I've been with the authority about 3 years now. I am the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, and very similarly, I am the liaison between community and local and state governments, so your State House legislative delegation as well as at the municipal level as well.
would just give us a brief outline of the MWRA and the community served and how many and the geographical diversity, because I'm sure many people are not familiar with MWRA. So.
And if you don't mind, just because it's taped and it's live, if you could just speak directly into the mic for those at home, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so MWRA serves 60 communities. Of those, we have 51 communities that are part of our water service area. Of that 51, 14 of them are partially served, meaning they have used MWRA as well as local sources. And then some of those communities, as you mentioned, some of them are both water and sewer. Our reservoirs, we get our water from the central part of the state, Quabbin Reservoir, as well as Wachusett Reservoir. Our safe yield of our reservoirs, meaning how much we could supply in the driest year, is 300 million gallons per day. Our current demand is about 200 million gallons per day. We do have 3 communities that we serve west of Quabbin Reservoir. The rest of them are served in the Metro West area, and then as well as south and north of Boston. The farthest south we go is Stoughton. I think that's probably our southernmost community on the water side.
And if I'm correct, you just had some communities join within the last couple of years, maybe North Reading or...
Yeah, so the communities that have joined since MWRA was formed, which was in 1985, we had Bedford join pretty soon after MWRA was formed. And then after that, we had Stoughton join, I think in the early 2000s. After that, we had Reading join, first as a partial supply community, and then they loved our product, and then they joined as a fully served community, and Wilmington. Right now, we also have North Reading interested in MWRA, pursuing admission to the MWRA. They've still haven't worked out everything. We have Ashland that has been interested in the MWRA. And then another question you had asked in advance was what other communities. So Union Point, the the Naval Air Station redevelopment, that's called Union Point these days. They've identified MWA as a preferred option. I think they're also considering other things as well, but we're in discussions with them. And a few years ago, we were talking to Braintree, Randolph, and Holbrook, but they seem like they're more interested in keeping their local sources, but Holbrook has always still been very interested in the MWA. That's kind of the lay of the land.
Now, if I've read the materials correctly, there's an initial fee to join the MWRA system. And am I correct when I say that that's based on what your anticipated consumption would be? So if you were going to, let's just take in round figures, if you were going to request 2 million gallons per day, 730 million gallons a year, then the fee would be based on 2 times whatever the initial fee is?
Absolutely.
And am I right that that's about $2.3 or $2.4 million now per million gallons?
Per million gallons, the entrance fee is $4.3 million. $4.3 million.
For 2 million?
Per million gallon.
Per million gallons?
Right.
Okay, so after that, there's, again, if I've read properly, and I'm not trying to take away your opportunity to speak, but currently, isn't it about $3,500 per million gallons per day?
Yes.
So if, for example, a community wanted to tie into the MWRA and they wanted 2 million gallons per day consumption, it would be 730 times the 3,500, which, if I'm right, comes out to about $2.61 million.
Well, I can't do the math in my head, but yeah.
But now tell me what that $2.6 million would cover. I mean, that would cover labor costs, it would cover, there's no extra fee after that? Or?
No, so our entrance fee is because other communities have already paid off the debt to construct our system. So you're buying into whatever your share of the system is. And that's based on what you estimate you're going to need from us. And so then annually, we have assessments to the communities that are based on your prior year's assumptions. So we take our whole amount of money that we need to run the water system, we divide it by the total demand of all the communities that are part of the system, and whatever percentage you are of that, that's what your assessment comes out to. So, you know, our rates are determined every year. Our advisory board which has representatives from all the cities and towns. They have input into the whole process, and that's how the rate's established. So part of it is to pay debt service, the part that hasn't been paid off yet, and then the other part is operation maintenance costs to run the treatment plant, to run the transmission system.
And am I correct that the initial entrance fee, if you call it that, you can amortize that over 25 years with no interest?
No interest. So yes, you can 25 years payment. The first 3 years are a grace period. You don't start paying into year 4, and there's no interest. Yes.
All right. Now you mentioned an advisory board, and I'm sure some of my fellow councilors might say, well, you know, if you're with the MWRA, you've given up control. Tell us a little bit about the advisory board. How is it chosen? What's the makeup of it? And what do they actually do?
You want to talk about it?
Sure. So the advisory board is made up of 1 member per each member community. And it is generally the chief executive or the chair of the board of selectmen or their appointee. And usually they designate someone. They meet monthly, and they consider a large array of policy measures, as well as they have a great input into the budget process that the authority goes through every year. It's presented to the advisory board, and then they provide feedback and comment to our board of directors going through the process.
And our board of directors has 11 members, and 3 of them are from the advisory board as well. So they get 2 bites of the apple.
Okay.
Many more than 2 bites, actually.
All right. I want to go back to the cost per million gallons per day. And again, let's just take the $2.61 million if you wanted 2 million gallons a day. What does that cover? Is that everything? There are no added-on assessments? There are no surcharges if suddenly there's a change in federal regulations on water treatment or something? Is that a fixed amount that would not change for that fiscal year?
Right. So the advisory board is very interested, as well as our board of directors, is making sure that rates are stable and that there's no surprises. So that's why they really try to figure out what our total revenue needs are, and then to base it on the past year's consumption. So if there's like all of a sudden a big demand or something like that, it's all sort of planned for in advance. So yeah, there's no, I think maybe there was one time in MW's history when we were expecting some money from the legislature. We didn't get some money from the legislature. So I think they had to make some change to what was required, but that's very rare.
So except for an extraordinary circumstance, you know what the bill is going to be for that fiscal year.
Right, and we don't expect money from the
Now,
legislature.
what if you didn't use all of the water that you thought you were going to? I mean, let's say a community hooks up and they want 2 million gallons a day, but they only use 1.4 million. Do you adjust the amount that's paid?
So the entrance fee is based on what the community thinks they need. So what communities have done before is they don't need that full amount of water right away. So they go through all the regulatory processes to take what they may need in the 20 years in the future, but they only buy in what they really think they need in the immediate future, with the understanding that once more need materializes, they will come back to us for revised contract limits and a revision to the entrance fee. Now, we had a community that came in, said they only needed a certain amount of water. They needed more, they took more water than that. So I called them up and I said, hey, why did you need more water than that? And they gave us a reason, so we didn't adjust the entrance fee. The same thing, last year in the drought, we had a couple of our communities that took more water than they thought they would need, but it was understood that it was an emergency, it was a drought. We didn't revise the entrance fee. But if it happened year after year after year, we'd say, okay, if you want to take this much water, we need to revise your entrance fee. But in terms of what we charge every year, it's only based on what you use. The entrance fee is based on what you think you're going to need, but the annual amount that we charge is based on only what you use.
So it would be adjusted up or down depending upon consumption.
Right, yeah. So if you said you're going to take 2 and you took 500,000 gallons, you'd only be charged 500,000 gallons.
Okay. Now, interbasin transfers. I had someone say to me, oh, you could never use the MWRA because Brockton's down here and Quabbin is up there and you can't do an interbasin transfer. And I'm looking at your map, and again, you're up in Marblehead, you're everywhere. Has there ever been a problem? I mean, does the state DEP or other regulatory agencies, once you've decided that yes, we will accept a community, do they work with you, or do they throw up every roadblock? Or give me an idea of how these interbasin transfer issues work.
So the Interbasin Transfer Act was passed around the same time MWRA was formed. So most of MWRA's communities all were in existence before the Interbasin Transfer Act. So they didn't have to go through Interbasin Transfer Act. So sometimes it's a regulatory process that drives people crazy because it takes time. There has to be a hearing here, there has to be a hearing there has to be a hearing 60 days later. But it's a process that everybody that wants MWRA water gets through. The other thing about it is, a number of years ago, there was this mantra in the state, keep water local, and the whole idea of transferring water from one basin to another was a terrible thing. Now, the current environmental reality is there's some areas of the state where water is in short supply. Ipswich River Basin, for example. Areas down in southern Massachusetts. So people say, well, the MWRA, because of all this conservation, once our demand was 340 MGD, now it's 300. MWRA has lots of water. They've stewarded the system. It's much easier to take water from MWRA than it is from some of the stress basins. So some of the opposition to interbasin transfer has gone away. There still will be some people that may have issues with it and may dog applicants during a regulatory process. But it's a process that, with patience, applicants are successful.
So the environmentalists kind of like the MWRA because you're not extracting water from some other source? Would that be?
That seems to be more what they're thinking these days. So, for example, you know, a number of years ago, when some of the communities in Ipswich River Basin were interested in MWRA, you know, there was someone from the Watershed Association that said, oh my gosh, I wish you guys would go away. Now the Ipswich River Watershed Association says, it's great that MWRA is out there. We wish more communities would be interested in MWRA.
And by the way, I apologize to my colleagues. It's just that I've had to do a lot of reading on this because it's a highly technical issue, and it's a comprehensive body of God bless you, comprehensive body of information out there on MWRA and communities. Getting down towards the end, other communities on the South Shore, have they, I don't know if you can publicly mention it, but other than Weymouth, have other communities said, you know, we really would like to maybe tie into the MWRA and have a long-term water source? And when I say long-term, to me, in a city of 100,000 people, where we're totally dependent really on Silver Lake, I'm talking 50 to 100 years. I'd like to think that maybe some of the decisions we make would stand this community in good stead for that length of time. But do you have other communities that have expressed an interest? Or?
So as I mentioned, at one point, Holbrook seemed to be more interested in the MWRA, and Union Point is obviously the big one out there. Other than that, you know, on occasion, I've heard nibblings from other communities, but nothing that's translated into any serious inquiry.
Okay. Obviously, the point at which a community would tie into the MWRA is important, because how far it is from your community obviously means expense. I would also think that the grade from where you tie in is going to have something to do with it, because water is going to flow, the diameter of the pipe, whether you have to put in pumping pumps along the way. So to come up with a fair and accurate assessment of that, that would really take an engineering study. Is that a fair statement? You'd want to get together with some of your technical people and say, this is what we would like to do, this is what we anticipate would be our consumption needs, where would we tie in? And then each community, I assume, as North Reading did, they appropriated, I think, $1.2 million for engineering studies to say, okay, this is where we're going to tie in, and this is where it will work.
Right.
Is that
right? So we're always happy to meet with prospective communities. We're always happy to meet with our communities to provide technical expertise, but it's the community connecting that's responsible for the engineering and the costs of connection. So your if the Brockton or whatever, any community that, if they were to hire a consultant, we would work with that consultant to kind of tell them the connection point. But we wouldn't tell the routing or anything like that. That's not what we do.
all right? Now, I'm going to close with a dark chapter of MWRA, because I think it's what set everyone kind of against the authority. Am I correct in saying that at one point there was a huge increase in sewer charges because of Boston Harbor cleanup and some other things? So the water side seems to be a bit more straightforward. Is that an accurate statement, that you don't have the fluctuations that you have with sewer issues? Or?
Well, so, I mean, you know, the Boston Harbor project was a $4 billion, you know, price tag. I mean, it was actually, I don't even remember what the cost is, but our water rates are separate than our sewer rates. And yes, it was a large project for the ratepayers to fund. The water rates, I mean, you know, we have an integrated water supply improvement program. We're very concerned about redundancy, so we're building things. But the whole idea is to keep rates stable. So that's what the advisory board is all about, is so to try to keep rate increases 4% a year or less. Some years it's less, and that's kind of what, sometimes it's 3%. That's the whole idea, is just to keep it all stable. But yeah, so we won't see a big jump.
All right, and next to last question, water quality testing, how often? Because you've got a huge system, so how often? And I assume you do it and reports come out? And
Yeah, I mean, so So MWA, I mean, you know, we test at the source, we test throughout the system, we test at the treatment plant. We have, and I'm not just saying this because I work for MWA, if you taste our water is absolutely delicious. We've had national taste tests. It's a very good quality water. One of the things that we've done, if you've been out to the Quabbin or Wachusett Reservoir, we believe the most important thing is to keep pollutants out of the water to begin with. So we have protected watersheds. We regulate it. We try to buy land when we can. That was actually the people that founded the system many, many years ago, where they made sure that there was undevelopable land right around us. So we have great water quality, and we keep it that way. We have a whole watershed protection division in the Department of Conservation and Recreation that we fund. So we're water quality, excellent water quality is what we do. Communities that are part of us, we work with them on any water quality issues they have in case they have a local system and questions come up in their local system, or if there's issues, we have water quality experts on staff, and we pride ourselves on the quality of our water.
And you also, last question, you also have grants periodically to communities from time to time, am I right?
Yeah, so we have grant programs that are part of, first of all, we do water quality testing for the communities, but we have grant programs that are part of what we do. We have a pipeline loan program, so for communities to replace their pipes. We have a program for like leak detection. Sometimes communities have a high amount of leaks and they're losing water to leaks. We have this leak detection program where the community still has to pay for the leak detection services, but we procure the leak detection services so that it's a master contract, so there's an economy of scale, and so people can use that. So we do lots of things with our communities to make their life easier.
All right. Thank you to my colleagues for your indulgence, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Council Farwell, thank you. Council Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you both for coming tonight. Obviously, this is one of the biggest financial decisions. I've been on the council 12 years, and there's a lot to this. It's also one of the most technical. So certainly tonight, I don't expect to get all my answers and make up my mind, but there are some things, and first of all, thank you to Councilor Farwell. Very in-depth questioning to get a lot of the information out. A couple of things I want to just make sure I understand. So first of all, the water is metered, so it doesn't matter. There just seemed to be a little discrepancy when you were talking, the two of you. If we say we're going to take 3 million gallons and we do 4.3 times 3 to buy in, but we only use 800,000 gallons, we only pay for 800,000 gallons.
Your annual amount, you only, aside from the entrance fee, you only pay for what you use. The entrance fee is you pay for what amount of water you think you're going to take. So if you think you're going to take 2 million gallons per day on an annualized basis, you're going to pay for that 2 million.
Right.
Your entrance fee is going to be that amount that you're paying. Then your annual amount, the amount that you, each year, you're only going to pay for what you use the preceding calendar.
I'm sorry, could we just have you speak into the mic so it won't be missed on TV as well? Thank you.
You only pay for what you use, so your water assessment for the next fiscal year is based on what you used in the prior calendar year. And we do that so people know what their assessment is when they're doing their budget, the DPW.
Oh, so it's not, basically, it's not a metered thing then?
It's metered, but it's based on the prior year.
The prior year. So this year we used 800,000 gallons. Our bill for the next year is based on 800,000 gallons. The next year we use 3.8 million. It's based on 3.8.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't clear. Yes.
Okay, I just want to, now, the advisory board, so every member community has a single vote, and that's not a weighted vote, that's a vote.
I think that on some matters it's a weighted vote.
I believe that is accurate, and we can get clarification to the council.
So it's a weighted vote by how many gallons you use, or? One of the complaints years ago was one of the reasons given for not joining when the former administration, the council built the desal plant, was that basically Boston sets the rate, because they have, in other words, if we use 800,000 gallons, we would have about probably a 1/10% of a vote.
I believe that's right on the finances, but we will follow up with a confirmation.
Okay, because that's pretty important. And the advisory board, are they truly that, just an advice? Does the board of directors make all final decisions, even if the advisory board was pushing them to make another decision? In other words, does the advisory board have legal standing, or is it truly just an advisory board?
Well, so I guess I would just add, as Pam said earlier, that the advisory board having 3 members appointed to the actual board of directors.
Which is how many members, board of directors?
It's 11. It's 3 from the city of Boston, it's 3 from the member communities, it's 3 that are appointed by the governor, and then it is 1 each from Winthrop.
Do me a favor.
Sure,
So 3 from Boston, 3 from member communities.
Yep, 3 appointed by the governor. And then 1 is appointed by the town of Winthrop, and 1 is appointed by the city of Quincy, by the mayor of Quincy.
So Winthrop and Quincy. Okay. All right. And what's the liability for water members only, for the overall, let's say there's a problem out at Deer Island in the sewer treatment plant, and the feds came in and said, you're going to have to spend $500 million to fix this. If you're a water community, you're not involved with that at all?
Right.
Okay, so if you're a water community, you're strictly involved with the Quabbin and the system coming down. My next question is, where would we be connecting if we were to do this?
So,
Again, sorry to be a pain. Can you speak into the microphone?
I'm sorry.
We have people at home that are very, and I apologize, but.
So the closest spot to Brockton in our system is up at Quincy at the Blue Hills. Sort of at the, so that's the closest spot. That's where we had done a study 18 years ago. That was the connection point. It's 11 miles to get there from here to the Brockton's border, but that is probably the closest place to connect. I had heard before we had come to this meeting that there was questions about, well, Stoughton's an MWRA community, they're right there, why don't we connect through Stoughton? Stoughton constructed a pipeline to get to our nearest place, which was in the northwest part of Canton. So
their pipeline couldn't handle.
You'd have to talk to Stoughton about that. You'd have to talk to Stoughton.
So there's a possibility it could be Stoughton, but as far as you know, a direct connection would have to be the Blue Hills.
Right. I mean, the whole thing about Stoughton is, since they're connected, to us up in Canton, usually in a community, and the DPW director can correct me if I'm wrong, but usually in a community, the smallest pipes in the community are at the community's edge.
Right.
So
I guess, as far as we know, and we don't have to get that specific yet, because we're not, but as far as we know, the closest connection that could handle, I mean, certainly if we were going to do this, we'd want the ability down the road to, my biggest fear, and the reason I've said we do have to have a second source, is our pipes are over 100 years old coming over, and we replaced them in bits and pieces, and we had a major breakdown about a year and a half ago, Larry, something like that, 2 years ago. If we bought in, we would want to build the system, I would imagine, to have the ability to eventually get to the 11 million gallons or so that we use regularly, because it would be silly to do all those connections and not make it big enough to handle the city. Because someday, who knows, Silver Lake could become contaminated, could become, if we were going to move that direction, I would think we'd want to make it so that it could eventually handle the whole city if it becomes the right way to go. So right now, that would probably mean the Blue Hills.
Right, right, yes.
Okay, I mean, and again, we're not that far into it that we need to,
Right.
I'm not expecting you to be able to say, this is what's going to cost, down to the dollar, and, but,
Because we'd have to re-engineer certain things if you were taking 11 million gallons out of the Blue Hills tank.
right.
Yeah.
Right, and again, those questions then kind of lead me into my next phase of my questions, are the permitting. So who would have to give us, first of all, do we have to be approved by the board of directors? Is it them? And have they ever turned anybody down?
No, the board of directors has never turned anybody down, nor has the advisory board. But before you get to us, so you have to go through the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act.
Okay, makes sense.
Any new community coming into MWRA. And then the Interbasin Transfer Act, as the other counselor had mentioned. And then, so those are the two major regulatory processes.
And are those both Mass DEP that?
No, so the Interbasin Transfer Act is the Water Resources Commission, which isn't MWRA. Some people sometimes confuse us. That's the Water Resources Commission, has people from different agencies appointed as well as public members. And then the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act is part of the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And then along the way, DEP is going to weigh in. DEP is going to comment through the MEPA process. They're going to comment through the Interbasin Transfer. DEP does sit on the Water Resources Commission as well. So those are the major regulatory processes. You would be extremely lucky if you could construct 11 miles of pipe and not hit a wetland. So you're going to invariably have some local permitting along the way. And, street opening permits from whatever communities you're going through. Those are going to come into play as well.
You don't happen to know, and I don't expect you to, what Stoughton paid, what for all those kind of, the application fees and all of that? You don't happen to know what they?
So I can, what Stoughton paid for permitting, I know they paid a certain amount to Canton, which was more than they wanted to pay.
Mm-hmm. It's always more than we want to pay.
Yeah. So more than they wanted. I know when they came into MWRA, they bought in at 1.15 MGD, and at that time, the entrance fee was about 5 million gallons. $5 million per million gallons, so the entrance fee's gone down a little bit. But they also have had to pay interest as well. But I can't say I don't know what they went through for permitting or anything like that.
No, they had to pay interest, but you said this is interest-free now.
Right, so in 2014, our board of directors adopted that policy of the interest-free, and they'll revisit it again, and they said they'll revisit it every 5 years.
So if you bought in and you're amortizing over 25 years, is that your deal, though? If they change that in 5 years, that doesn't change that deal, does it?
Not if you've already bought in, no.
Okay, but if you...
But 5 years from now, if Brockton then approached MWRA, didn't approach them now, but 5 years from now, whether or not the board of directors will have, revisited it and changed, I...
No, well, I guess my question is, once we've made the deal, are we locked in at that deal?
Yes, that's right.
It does not change. Okay.
Yes.
I would assume that.
Right.
Okay.
And if you were, before we once had, when we made some policy change, we had some communities that had started the process. They were in MEPA. They had made some very strong steps towards becoming an MWRA community, and the revision to the policy said this doesn't apply to the communities that are already in the process.
That are already in process.
We don't change things midstream.
Okay, you know what? There's a lot to think about, so thank you again very much for coming down tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ezak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, and thank you for being here. We really appreciate this information. Ms. Heidel, you said you have been with the MWRA for 20 years, I believe?
28.
28,
28
wow.
and counting.
Well,
yeah.
Very nice. So I have a question. I don't expect you to be able to answer it, but we're in a contract. We're in this contract with Aquaria for another 12 years. At the rate that you've seen MWRA throughout the last 28 years, where do you see the rates in another 12 years when Brockton could possibly be ready to work with MWRA?
Well, I can't speak for 12 years, but as I said, that whole predictable thing is pretty important to the MWRA. I've seen rate projections for the next 10 years that have annually an increase of 4% per year. Sometimes most of the time, or frequently, our rate projections are actually less than our actual rates. But, so I can certainly send along our 10-year rate projections.
I would really love to see that, because that's what's important to me. I know I wasn't on the city council when, I believe 8 years ago, when the decision was made not to go with MWRA, and that's what we hear in the community. We hear from our constituents, why don't we hook up with MWRA? And as I see, it's pretty, with anything, it's a process and it's complicated. But I would like to, be able to make the best decisions possible, for whoever's here in the 12 years down the line. So I want to make sure that we have the information that we need. So I would appreciate that.
Yep, definitely.
And my colleagues asked all the questions that I had, so I won't keep you longer, but thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Beauregard, followed by Councilor Barnes.
Point of information, I hate to interrupt. It was about 16 years ago that
Yes. Yes, it was. Nobody that sits on this council was involved in that matter. Councilor Beauregard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you again for both being here this evening. Do you handle the if a community has fluoride in their water, drinking water?
Do we do fluoridate.
You do fluoridate if the community wishes to have the fluoride treatment?
We fluoridate at our treatment plant.
Okay.
Once the fluoride's in, it doesn't get taken out.
Okay, so every community ends up with fluoride?
Every MWRA community ends up with fluoride.
Okay. And, I'm sorry, you've given us a lot of valuable information, and many of us have what we refer to as ward meetings or community meetings to inform people. Is there such a thing as some handouts or some sort of video that we could play to individuals, within a reasonable amount of time so they could absorb some of this information?
Yeah, so we do. I brought a few with us tonight. This is our 5-year progress report, which provides an overview of the authority as well as what's been going on over the past 5 years, the progress we've made for both the water and the sewer side. I would also encourage you all, if you are having these meetings, to direct your constituents to our website. There is really a treasure trove of information. All our public notices, all the presentations that we give to our board all remain up on our website. And, if we've done it and it is public, which it all is, it is on the website, and they do a really nice job at keeping that fairly easy to find. So I'll drop these with the clerk, and then please feel free. We try not to bring too many to a community. We are an environmental organization, so we try to not print too many things, but that is also available on the website.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Barnes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues and thank you for coming and answering these questions. I know I had to step out for a minute, but I don't know if this came up. So with the communities that hook into the MWRA and, things go fine, few years, something happens, I don't know. Is there an exit strategy for communities to come out, or if once you're hooked in, you're hooked in?
So,
That's a good question.
we've never had a community that says, we don't want any MWRA water anymore. We've had communities that have said, okay, now that like for example, Stoughton, when they joined MWRA, they joined for a certain amount of water. Having MWRA water coming into the community enabled them to take some wells out of service and improve the wells, improve their whole infrastructure. So then once they came back online, or once they brought those wells back online, they took less MWRA water. They're still paying the entrance fee, but they're only paying for the water that they use from MWRA. And that's what you'll see more often than not.
So there's no way out. You just kind of pull back a little bit as the community sees fit. Once you're locked in, you're locked in.
You're locked into the entrance fee, yes. That's why we encourage communities to only come on board with what they need in the immediate future. Don't say, well, 20 years from now, I'm going to need 10 MGD of water. I'm going to buy in at 10 MGD. We don't encourage people to do that.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Barnes. Councilor Lally, followed by Monahan, please.
Thank you. I won't keep you too long. I just had, a lot of my questions were answered. I just had one question. We're deciding, we're sort of at a crossroads right now. Do we continue with our Aquaria plant on the Taunton River? Do we try and buy that plant? Do we look for other options like the MWRA? What do we do? So besides the volume of water, which, can't be matched, what does the MWRA offer Brockton that either a new deal with Aquaria or ownership of the Aquaria plant does not?
I don't, it's an excellent question, and it's one I don't want to sit here and make almost a sales pitch versus trying to answer some of these questions. I mean, we do provide the water, and we do provide the maintenance of the water, the treatment of the water. And I like to think that our community assistance programs, which Pam's already outlined, and our staff expertise, I think we're good neighbors, and we're good to our customer communities if they're in need. But I mean, besides that, I wouldn't want to to prejudge, what the city gains from the Aquaria deal, or, what we would do. I think it's safer to leave it there.
Oh, thank you.
You good, Counselor?
Yep.
Counselor Monahan, please.
Yes, good evening. I just wanted to see if I understand this. So initially, there's a joining fee, depending on what you project you want to use. And that can be paid off after 3 years or 25 years with no interest? Okay. So now, the other part is that you said that we are responsible for all permitting and infrastructure to connect up to the water. So we'd have to pay for 11 miles of infrastructure and permitting to Blue Hills. That's got nothing to do with, that'll be all on our dime, no interest or anything else like that, right? So the joining fee, 25 years of pay, it's not really that much, at no interest, but we would have to pay for all that infrastructure and permitting, which seems to be quite a bit of money from what you were just talking to Council Cruz about. And that's something that's totally separate from you guys. That's totally on the city's dime that we have to pay for, beside what we're paying the MWRA. That's it. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councilor Farwell.
Just last two questions, and Councilor Azak raised a good one. The projected increase in costs, I assume you're looking at historical data about how much it costs to process 1 million gallons of water, and that's how you have kind of decided that over the next 10 years it may go up to this level. I mean, it's not just some number off a dartboard. There's an analysis done as to what it's cost thus far, what regulatory changes, infrastructure changes may be needed, and then you translate that into what you think might be a projected increase.
Right, so you've probably heard this before. A lot of MWA rates is paying off debt service, paying off the treatment plant that we built, paying off the Metro West Tunnel, paying those things. So that's why our rates are pretty predictable, is because we have a lot of that rate is based on our capital improvement program. We deliver 80% of our water by gravity. So not a lot of electricity costs in there. Obviously, some electricity costs for the treatment plant. But yes, then we have, certain costs for operating the treatment plant and certain costs, for, personnel, things like that.
Okay, and the last question is, if there were other communities, you mentioned Weymouth, Holbrook, if Brockton were to go in this direction, again, if, you could certainly collaborate with other communities on engineering costs and infrastructure costs. In other words, you folks don't care how it's paid for as long as it's up to your standards and the transmission system is sufficient to handle the water coming to whatever community it is.
Yeah, so we encourage communities to collaborate. I mean, we definitely encourage the communities to collaborate. We'll provide a specification for the connection point to MWRA, the meter vault, the meter that gets installed. Once that pipe's in the ground, that doesn't become our infrastructure. That still remains the community's infrastructure. So how you construct that pipe is up to you. We'll certainly provide whatever, questions, people have questions, we'll work with people, but that's up for the communities connecting to MWRA to decide.
Have you ever seen the Commonwealth step in and help a community or communities because of it helps eliminate environmental concerns or,
So a couple years ago, the legislature pass legislation but it's subject to appropriation.
Okay.
So, we've had communities get Mass Works grants or apply for Mass Works grants for some aspect of connecting to the MWRA. We've seen that, but, yeah. I mean, quite honestly, Stoughton built a couple-mile pipeline, but other communities haven't had to build very large infrastructure to get to us. Our system went pretty close to Reading and Wilmington to begin with, because Woburn is a community, and Bedford is wheeling water through Lexington. So I can say that most communities haven't found themselves in the same position that Brockton.
Could you just explain, is wheeling water going through another community's system? Is that what wheeling, you just said wheeling?
Yes, yes.
Is that what that means?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much again, Ms. Hydell and Mr. Navin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question for you. In the last 5 years, how many communities have hooked up to the MWRA?
I think in the last 5 years, I think Reading and Wilmington did that before 5 years ago.
So in the last 5 years, you haven't had any new customers?
I don't think so.
Not actually hook up. We had
Union
Enabling
Point.
Act was amended for North Reading, but they have not been done.
Okay.
Okay. We did talk, you did mention that it's going to take about 11 plus miles from here to Blue Hills. In your experience, what would be the cost, let's say, per mile of infrastructure, let's say for a 3.5 million, 4 million gallon capabilities?
So I provided a consultant to the Chamber of Commerce some numbers on MWRA costs for a 24-inch diameter pipe. And it was something like $964 per foot. But that doesn't include any legal costs, any easement costs, any mitigation costs. So I really would have to say that I don't want to put a number on what the cost of connecting of constructing that pipeline is, because it is very site-specific.
And that analysis is old.
And so that was one analysis, and then years ago we did another analysis where there's a number in there, and again, that analysis is 18 years old. So I would, I'm not trying to avoid the question, I just have to say that it's really something that your consultants or someone else would really have to take a stab at, because if some community came up to you and said, oh, you know, we're going to charge you millions of dollars for mitigation, I wouldn't want someone to say, oh, Pam, you told me it was going to cost this much, because constructing a pipeline, it's not just putting the pipe in the ground. There's a lot of other variables.
Well, it seems that just in my quick math, just in pipe alone, we're talking about $51 million.
Yeah.
Just in pipes.
Forget the fees.
Forget the fees, forget the digging, forget the permitting and all that other stuff. Okay, one more quick one. In terms of the water rates are established by the MWRA for the communities, and how much local input does the local communities have, for instance, to increase, decrease water rates based on their own necessities?
So we're the wholesaler of water. So that's what our rate is. And then the community is the retailer of water. So the community still will set whatever rate for that retail that you need to do for your own distribution system. So the community still will be setting their own local rates, and part of the local rate, you know, and then MWRA rate is something that gets included in what they charge the customers. So we have some communities where MWRA may be a third of the rate, that the retail rate in the community. We have some communities where it may be 2/3. We have some communities where it may be half. It really varies by what the community. We charge every community the same amount per million gallons. You can sort of see a big variety. As Sean mentioned, we have a website, and on the website, the MWRA Advisory Board, you can get to the MWRA Advisory Board, we'll send the link. Every year, the MWRA Advisory Board publishes a rate survey, and that rate survey gives you all the different rates, community rates. So you'll see that there's a big variety, and you'll see that obviously it's up to the locals to establish what their rate is within the community.
So Boston is your largest user. Perhaps Quincy would be the next one? Or Cambridge and Somerville and...
Yeah, I don't think Quincy is the second largest. Yeah.
It's probably Cambridge.
Cambridge is actually an emergency-only community.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Okay. So basically, what does Boston pay for, what does Boston charge per a million gallon of water, do you know?
I'll have to get that to you.
Okay.
We'll have to follow up with that.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council. Council Ezek has a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. You've mentioned a few times your website. Can you give everybody at home the correct website address?
Yes, www.mwra.com.
Thank you.
Council Cruz has a follow-up.
Thank you. Just, two brief questions. I think you answered this a minute ago, but, so, we would own from that connection, let's say we go through this and we connect in the Blue Hills and there's a leak somewhere. Who goes out to fix that?
Your crews, but our crews as well. I think there was, we've even provided assistance to communities that are not part of the MWRA. We have people that, we're always there to help.
Let me rephrase that. Whose dime? Right. Okay. So it's be just like a leak in the street here. So we would own from that connection out, and you would own from that connection back. And we'd have to fight over the connection if the leak was right there. And then just one last question. The treatment plants, what's the age of the plants and the piping system?
So we constructed the John J. Carroll treatment plant.
Is that the big one off the pike there, or
It's in Marlboro.
It's in Marlboro. What you see off the pike,
Yeah.
you see a big storage tank.
Yeah.
So that's a big storage
Okay,
tank.
that's all that's there, okay.
With treated water, but there's no treatment going on there. So our big treatment plant is out in Marlboro. We added UV, how many years ago? Like maybe 5 years ago, and then we built the whole plant, maybe 10 years, 10, 15 years ago. I'll get the precise numbers. I'm
Okay.
old.
I mean, I'm just wondering, we've had to do some rebuilding down at Silver Lake, that kind of thing. Those are the major things that can change those rates in a big way.
Yeah, but we pride ourselves on maintenance. We pride ourselves of keeping up to things so that there's not all of a sudden some surprise that comes along. So that is included in our rate projections, assuming a certain amount of maintenance, things like that.
All right. And again, I want to thank you. You've been very knowledgeable, and you've both been great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council. I too want to thank you. I co-sponsored this. I drafted this with Council Farwell, and again, there's a proposal to purchase Aquaria for $78 million, and we as a legislative body need to do our homework, and this is actually one vital piece. One question that I have, and I think you answered, and thanks to all my colleagues, there was some really well-spoken questions tonight. I think there's a little more information gathering that we need to do, and you're going to give us some more information as well. But we don't know for certain that we couldn't tie into Stoughton. It might not be easy, it might not be cheap, but we don't know as of right now if it's implausible to do, based upon we don't know what that size of the pipe is at the end. Is that correct? Because originally when they came into fruition, and I've read, and I want to thank Mr. Cooney, I read all the information you provided, the consultant, the 99 study and all that, but again, the closest connection relative to direct deposit would be Quincy, near Blue Hills. But as of right now, I mean, we can't totally rule out Stoughton. That's accurate, right?
I think you can rule them out for 11 MGD, but a smaller amount, that's a discussion you'd have to have with them.
With the municipality?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Well, I think we'll probably, I know for a fact we're going to have more information and more questions, and I know Mr. Navin has had a lot of conversations with Councilor Fowler. I think we'll continue that. We're doing our homework on other endeavors as well, but you journeyed here tonight. We do appreciate that on a summer night to come down here. Are there any other questions? Councilors, any other questions before we let these people depart? Councilor Fowler.
I'd like to move to postpone this to a meeting in October. I'm sure I'm going to think of some more questions. I can write to our colleagues here at MWRA, bring more information in. We may not have to have them come back, or at least we might have an option to have them come back. And I mean, there's a lot of technical material to digest.
I appreciate that. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Excuse me, but what was it, to October?
Postpone it to October.
Thank you.
Motion on the floor is probably second to postpone the resolve relative to this matter until October, the first finance in October, because we're back in the regular session, Councilor. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. We want to thank you again.
Thank you
very much. Have a good evening. Safe travels. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Good night.
Madam Clerk, we're going to postpone that until first finance in October, please. And we're going to go on to the next agenda item now, which would go back up to 20, please.
Resolve to invite the city solicitor, police chief, and traffic commission chair to appear before the finance committee to discuss the current process and procedures relative to block parties and/or neighborhood parties within the city of Brockton. Invited, Honorable Mayor Bill Carpenter, Philip C. Nazralla, solicitor, John Crowley, chief, Brockton Police Department, Robert DeBari, captain, traffic commission.
Councilors, just a piece of information. I filed this resolve. It was joined by Councilor Ianieri and Councilor Farwell. And I do know that Captain DeBerry's here tonight. And I think that because he's here and he's probably in overtime where he should be doing something else, I think out of respect for him and his professionalism, I'd like to have him come forward on that matter since he's been patient sitting there. And I know solicitors here as well. Now, again, the mayor and the chief aren't here, so we as a collective body have to figure out what we want to do on this matter. But with that being said, Captain DeBerry, good evening.
Good evening. Mr.
Councilor Ianieri.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, since we, as you said, you signed on and Councilor Fowle signed on as well as I, and as you all know, colleagues, we had a situation several weeks ago that occurred on Myrtle Street, which is in my ward, Ward 3. And the situation was in regards to a block party that was held on that street during the course of a mid-afternoon, early evening, concluded, and then unfortunately had a mishap with a shooting at the same time, which occurred after pretty much the close of that party. The reason we have you here tonight, Captain, is because we wanted to discuss with you process and procedure relative to block parties, neighborhood parties in itself. When that had occurred, there was a host of a lot of questions, as you know, and you, being captain, you were privy to what was transpiring and what had transpired. And I, as the ward councilor, I was never aware of the whole situation until early that Monday morning it was, when everything had unfortunately occurred, and the situation had been, with the passing of a person that was shot at the conclusion, which was somewhat, as we say, two different issues, pretty much, but, the person knew what they were doing when they came back and were looking for the person that they wanted to, obviously, shoot, and hate to say it that way. But in any case, it caused a big eruption on Myrtle Street from the start of the fact that, there was a block party. And I said in the newspaper, to me, a block party belongs on a small street, cul-de-sac, dead-end road. Why there was ever a block party given, permission to be given to streets such as Myrtle Street, which is a throughway street from Warren Avenue right up to Taboo. And I don't have to tell you what Myrtle Street's all about. You lived there at one time. You grew up on that street as a young child with your family. So you're familiar with that, with the street in itself. I think the occurrence of the fact that, the road got blocked off, the way it got blocked off, how it was controlled and how it got blocked off, which was really not the control of the police department, which it probably should have been, but it was control of the people that lived on the street, was totally, the situation that was totally out of control. And I have to go by everything that was given to me afterwards, by even having a meeting with some of these people a few days later, meeting with some of the people from Myrtle Street, even with Councilor Monahan and Councilor Fowle. We sat down with these people at George's Cafe in the function room and discussed with them just what transpired. And then the issue was, you know, how did it all happen? So, be it said, we can talk about that, you know, keep talking about that, and we probably need to, as much as we had another meeting after that. Even Councilor Sullivan was with me at the I forget the name of the council, but I think it was Lifetime Parish there at Nilsson Street, and the council president and I were present with other people, again, from Myrtle Street, and with some other people from within the city. And the mayor was there to answer questions. Lieutenant Linehan was there, and Lieutenant Procaro also. But
Council, point of information, it's called New Life.
New Life, excuse me, I apologize. But any case, you know, even at that meeting, there's still some things that never got answered, and in retrospect to that, a lot of it's dealing with phone calls that were made, where the phone calls went. There were responses by the police department, but then again, there's still phone calls that aren't accounted for to a point. And I've had a clearance in my mind to understand that with the help of Officer, our good friend, our Crime Watch coordinator, for you know, bringing it to my attention to what that's all about in the understanding piece. But I think right now what we're trying to just do is to understand how the whole procedure of a block party takes effect, and we do realize that there's going to be a change in that. The mayor's making a change to making a different ordinance he's going to present to the city council, and we're going to naturally, you know, look at that and no doubt fine tune it or any way that we can. But in any case, just for you to talk to us tonight, we just want to understand how the process was met that day or any other time with block parties, and how and who signs off and on and where it goes, how the whole piece of paper gets tracked, I guess. So that's why you're here. Not here to beat up on anybody. We just want the understanding, and I know there's still things that people are not happy with, have never gotten true answers. Even, again, when we met that night, they were not, everything was just, we hear the telephone calls are hung up because of all part of investigation, but why should they be a part of investigation? Everything occurred, remember what occurred afterwards. These phone calls were prior to the situation that occurred at midnight. So, with that being said, I just put that out to you, and, you know, wherever you can go with it, appreciate it.
All right. So, what happens is people fill out an event questionnaire. That event questionnaire comes to me in the police department. It gets signed off by me, and then it gets signed off by someone at the fire department. From there, they take that to City Hall to try to get their permit for their block party or graduation party or whatever they're going to have. Right. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's a, you know, date, time, location. Most of the time, the only stipulations are that emergency vehicles are able to pass through. Never have I ever given anybody permission to put fencing across a street to block off a street to have a block party. I mean, that doesn't happen. I know it happened this night, but that was not part of the questionnaire or anything like that. They're usually pretty cut and dry. The only difference on this one from the other stipulations that I usually put on them, this one was going to 9:45 p.m. I usually have a cutoff date of 8 o'clock. That's about the time in the summertime when it gets dark, and I usually don't like to have you know, the streets being blocked in the dark. Basically, that's the only process that I have with it. And once they violate, once somebody has a block party and they violate the terms of their agreement, then, in my opinion, the party should be shut down.
And let me just ask you, because, again, and you were, I think you were unaware of the situation, the fact that they were even going to be blocking the street the way that they did block it.
I spoke to the gentleman that's on here. Can't really read his name. But I had asked him about where he was blocking it. For the people coming west on Myrtle Street, it was going to be blocked at Blaine, so people would be able to turn down Blaine Street. And for the people coming east on Myrtle from Grafton, I asked him what he was going to do there. Basically, I said it's kind of a long stretch of road that people can travel down before they have to turn around and go back. He mentioned to me that the fire department suggested to put signs on the telephone pole, be prepared to stop, block party ahead. I thought that made sense. I did ask him if somebody came down and they got to the block party and they didn't want to turn around, would they be able to get through? He said, absolutely. All we have is cones across the street. We'll be able to let them through.
And during the, not that I'm trying to question you, but just so everyone does understand, and I know there's some people here, but I just want to, hear from you as a captain, since you've been there for a length of time, so you know the process. But when phone calls come in, such as the phone calls came in that afternoon, and there were several of them, there were, I think, officers that did respond about 3 different times, but there was maybe 20, 25 phone calls. When those calls do come in, constant phone calls come in, they go into a different lot, a different swing to a different file. Am I correct? I mean, you can't respond to 28 phone calls all in.
So there were 4 calls for service that night for that block party. 4 calls for service.
But if there was still
So
people calling...
there were 8 phone calls that came into the police station. That's all, 8. I had our IT people run the tapes. He pulled the tapes for internal affairs, and he told me that there were 8 phone calls that came in for that party, that's all. So where you're getting 20 phone calls came in regards to complaining about the noise or that block party, there were 8.
And only 8, I mean, that's...
Only 8.
Okay.
And that's according to him running those tapes from that time frame of when the party was going on. There was only 1 call after 9:30. And the shooting, not that I can really talk too much about it, but...
Exactly, I understand.
It was well after this party was supposed to be over.
Right.
The party was supposed to go to 9:30, the shooting happened after midnight. So, I think to say that the permit had something to do with a murder in the city that night, I think is a stretch.
Yeah, because it was a twofold. I think there's still the concern is the fact that how the party was held and the fact that how the road was blocked, and there's still going to be the dispute of, other phone calls than just what you're saying, and, I'm not going to say you're wrong, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
that night, we weren't even given any piece of information because we were told they couldn't talk about the phone calls because they're all part of the investigation, which didn't make sense to me because that, the investigation of what transpired afterwards had nothing to do with what transpired from the time of the block party.
Right.
That's what left me in a stump and leaves the people in a stump.
Officer Sean Besrick is our, he runs all the tapes, all the 911 tapes, all the regular phone, the non-emergency numbers. When I got the invitation to be here tonight, I went to him and asked him, and he said, I already did it for internal affairs, but I'll do it again. And he got back to me and said, we received 8 phone calls.
Right. At this point in time, there's no block parties, there's nothing going on, they're done, according to what the mayor has indicated.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm not signing off on any more block parties.
And nor should he be, I would hope not, but according to what he's told us that night that we were at that church, that's it, done until the ordinance comes before the city council, and hopefully that'll be coming to us soon, and we'll be, piecing that together. But still, it's just an occurrence that, it shouldn't have happened, and I just put it out there that, it's happening throughout the city, all these types of different parties. It's tough to tell people you can't have a private party at your house, but you travel throughout the city, and you go up and down streets, and you don't find 4, 5, 6 cars, you find 15, 20, 25 cars. You can't even get down streets. Just a week after that, I was traveling in the area, and I couldn't even get up Custer Street. Someone's blowing the horn and telling me to back up. No, I wasn't backing up. You know what I mean? I wasn't going to back up. They were going to have to find their way. But I mean, still, it's tough, and I don't know what we're going to do. That's something that we're going to have to do something with, because it's just a little bit out of control, but.
Well, just like anything else, people call in parking violations if there's a party and there's 50 cars there and the cars can't get down the street, fire trucks can't get down the street. People call the police. I mean, it's our job to go out there and get them to move those cars.
Right.
Tag them, or tow them if it's a hazard. I mean, that's an option. We do that every day.
Yeah, it's just getting tough. That's all I have right at the moment, Mr. President. Thank you.
Just had a follow-up on you. Captain, on that application, it's a basic application, but is there a question there to the applicant about expected guests or how many attendees you believe you'd have?
Yes.
And so that was filled out. And then is there ever a stipulation or a condition put on approval where they need to have a detailed police officer there?
Not on the event questionnaire that I see, but I do have actually a copy of the permit, and it does mention something about a police detail. As long as I've been doing this, I've never seen anybody have a police detail.
Okay, thank you. We have quite a few questions. We're going to have Council Farwell, followed by Monahan, followed by Bonds.
No, you took my question, I'm good.
I took your question? Council Farwell, please.
You'll pay for it later.
Captain DeBarry, welcome. You and I work together, and you know I respect the police.
Yes.
I have to tell you, I'm disappointed that the chief's not here tonight. This is a major issue to residents in the area. If I had the salary of the police chief and I were honored to serve, just as a matter of professional courtesy, I would come into the council meeting in case someone had a question. And I have to tell you, I've noticed this for the time I've been here since January of 2016, there just seems to be sometimes an indifferent attitude about, well, we'll send someone else. So I guess in some way you got thrown under the bus today, because I have a couple of questions which you probably will not be able to answer, and I understand that. You're not the chief of the department. This permit that's issued, and it's not the Chapter 136 license, which is a public entertainment on Sunday license. It plainly states that the applicant will take all reasonable steps necessary for the protection of public safety and order. The applicant will provide a police detail during the hours of operation. But then it says the applicant and/or the operator of the carnival activities will maintain insurance, naming the city as co-insured. So I'm not even sure this form was necessarily applicable to a block party. My question is this: when the sergeant went out and found the road blocked and found no police detail, why wouldn't the police department say, you've got to get up onto your property, you can't have a fence up, and the dynamics of this permit have changed because you've already caused a major issue? Why wouldn't the sergeant be able to do that? And why wasn't it done, if you've had any conversation with him?
I have not had any conversation with him about that. I think it absolutely could have been done, should have been done. Why he chose not to take those steps, I really don't know.
All right, let me go on to the Chapter 136 license, public entertainment on Sunday. This was for 3 to 9, graduation block party. Did you have anything to do with waiving the fee? Because in our city ordinances, a Sunday entertainment license is $120, and on this it says 0.
I don't see any of that. All I see that comes to me is the event questionnaire, which is basically 2 pages long, and then my signature.
Okay, so this one you don't see, and probably the sergeant wouldn't have seen it.
No,
I
not
will
unless they
say,
showed
just
it.
for the record, colleagues, this particular license plainly states that the chief of police or anyone they designate may go onto the property, may check out the event, may make observations. The people that Councilor Monahan and Councilor Iannieri and I spoke to said that they had a bar set up in the backyard. I think they had a bartender, and allegedly there were alcoholic beverages being sold. And I believe those people. If that's true, then that's a violation of Chapter 138, the alcoholic beverage laws. And so I guess that's my next question. If, as you say, you had 8 calls there, how many calls does it take for somebody to shut the damn thing down? How many times do we go back to an address which obviously created enough of a disturbance so that you had multiple calls? What's the drop dead number? 12, 15, and I'm not being sarcastic, but if I lived in that area and perhaps I had to go to work at midnight, or maybe I just got off work, I don't understand why we just didn't say, whoa, time out, this is out of control. And again, you weren't there, and the chief isn't here to answer a policy question, but you and I have been on the street. We would have shut that thing down.
Right, there is no certain number we use to, you know, years ago, when I was a patrolman, there was always the, 3 strikes and you're out, after 3 times, you're not gonna abide by the rules, then we'll shut you down. Like I said, we had 4 calls for service. The first one was a parking violation. That sat on the board for quite a while. They never sent an officer to that one. Then shortly thereafter, a disturbance call came in, so they basically combined the 2 calls. And then there was another disturbance after that, and then the 4th call was for the shooting. So those were the, but like I said, if with fencing across, they never had permission to put fencing across the street, and, I mean, I wasn't there, so I don't know.
I know.
How.
And you know what? It's not fair for any of us to put you on the hot seat. I do think this matter should still be discussed with the police chief and the mayor, but I'll leave that to someone else to make I don't want to spin my wheels, but you know what? It shouldn't happen again. And I'm really getting concerned that there seems to be a disconnect between people calling the police and us getting out to help them. And I'll tell you why that bothers me. Someday someone's going to call in, you know what, my neighbor's got a loud radio, he just turned it up, and it's bothering me. And somebody in there, a telephone operator, is going to say, well, you know what, that's not a big deal. But you and I know that sometimes people turn up the radio with a TV, and then they go beat someone, either a female or a kid, and they do that sound over to try to mask what's going on. And so that's why it's so important to at least go out there and check out and see what are we dealing with and what intervention is or is not needed. And that's a discussion that I think has to take place with not you, Captain DeBarry. You've been a great officer, and I'm not going to throw you under the bus for this one. So I appreciate you being
just
here.
on that, though, the telephone operators do not have the discretion to decide whether they want to put a call in for service or not.
One of the telephone operators, and I'm not sure, the person might be here tonight, one of the telephone operators told one of the people that Councilor Ianieri and Monahan and I met, there's nothing we can do, they have a permit.
Well, then they were wrong.
Yeah, they sure were. They sure were.
And just for between the hours of 8 to 4 in the 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. that day, the day shift handled 73 calls for service total, and the 4 to midnight shift answered 116 calls for service.
Yeah, no,
So it's not like we just take calls and not send anybody. That should not happen.
It is a busy department, but I still sense there's a disconnect. I don't want to turn off the public, because you and I know we need them to solve crimes.
Sure.
If they feel we don't care about them, then they're not really going to help us out if we need some information about who did a shooting, who committed a crime, et cetera, et cetera. But everyone does a great job, but I do think it needs to be dialed up a notch, and that's up to the chief. That's up to him to pull together the resources, decide how they're allocated, and make sure that we provide the highest level of services we can, given the resources, to the people in the city. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council. I have Councilor Barnes, followed by Azak, followed by Beauregard. And again, if you have any questions specific to Captain DeBarry or Attorney Nezzarella, feel free to ask them. If there's anything directed off point that would go to the chief or the mayor, really shouldn't be asking it. Thank you. You have the floor, Councilor Barnes.
Thank you, and actually, maybe you can triage this question, Mr. Chairman. It might go to the chief as I'm listening to the line of questioning that my colleague put forward just now, but I guess I'm just kind of asking, as captain, procedurally, if there's a party, even if there are no calls, if there are parties logged, or, there's a party at, 202 Court Street, and people are outside or whatever, do police officers, do folks kind of just get sent by just to go maybe do like a well check, not even getting out of the car, but just to drive by to make sure there aren't, an obscene number of cars, or people aren't kind of getting rowdy, or that even in plain sight, they may see something that could be a violation. Does that just happen, or do folks have to initiate it with a call to have a police come to a party?
Without a call for service, the officers on the street would have no idea that there was a party going on there unless they drove by and saw all the cars and heard the noise or anything like that. They wouldn't know that this block party even existed until there was a call for service.
So when everybody comes in and they kind of do the rundown for the shifts, there's no kind of I guess thing says, hey, there's or these permits were issued for graduation, baby shower. To be 100% honest, this is a innocent graduation party. How many have we had here in the city, and someone was killed because of it, not at it, but because of it. But a few years ago, if you recall, there was a young girl, 16 years old, who was killed coming out of a baby shower. So, this is not like it doesn't happen. One is too many, so now two is just out of control. I'm just kind of saying maybe there should be some kind of, and again, this could be for the chief, but maybe bring this back to him when he comes, when we bring this up again, just to let folks know there are permits put out for these particular things, even if they seem innocent.
Counsel, I think you bring a good point, because if a license is rendered and an application is submitted, you would think that there'd be a follow-up from the city side to make sure the person is adhering to what the city granted.
I
think you bring a good point, and again, we could direct that to the chief, unless you want to say anything, Captain, on that.
Thank you.
No, like I said, the event questionnaire, once I sign off on it, I'm not even privy if they even get the permit.
Right, you're done after that.
Right.
Okay. Thank you, Counsel. Counsel, Azak, followed by Beauregard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Captain.
Good evening.
And I know that a lot of these questions are for the chief, but I do appreciate you being here. My question is, I know we're talking about the block party this evening, but we have a lot of quality of life issues that are happening, whether it's fireworks, noise, nuisances, and the police department gets a lot of these calls. And they're dealt kind of the same way as similar to the party. What can we do we already have ordinances. And for whatever reason, depending on whoever goes out, whichever officer goes out to these calls, it's up to their discrepancy whether they ticket, shut down, how can we be stronger to enforce these? We need to have all our, department kind of on the same line. If somebody goes out to this, whether somebody has parked a car and blocked a driveway, they need to, ticket, tow, whatever it may be. I'll be honest with you, and we've had this discussion before. I get a lot of calls from residents, and it seems that whichever officer goes out, it depends on some ticket, some just, slap on the hand, or, and then it's repeat offenders. I feel like, yes, we can give a warning once, but we need to get tougher. And I know you have men under you that you direct, so what can we do? And I know this, once again, it's for the chief, but even just for you're the ones that you're dealing with. What can we do so when we work on these ordinances, they're solid, we don't just have another ordinance on the books, because we have a lot of them, and we have problems with fireworks, parking. We put up signs with the traffic commission, yet people break these rules, ordinances, laws constantly. So we really need to work on our enforcement.
Well, it's very difficult to take the discretion away from each individual officer when they go. To have one set, we respond, we do X. I wouldn't be for that. There has to be some discretion. And then again, I think the really answer to your question is, it's got to be a policy, and it's got to be the policy of the police department. So.
And that's it right there. It has to be the policy of the police department. And with all respect, I'm very proud of our police department. I know where we work hard, you all work hard, but we just, as a community, I feel we have to work together to find solutions to some of these problems. And not to go off a little bit, but the applications that, I've never seen a block party application. I've never had one on Prospect Street. I don't know if we could shut it down, but don't block parties, aren't you supposed to notify your neighbors that is that part of the application that they fill out, or, I don't remember seeing it.
There's nothing on there that says,
Really?
Because I had heard a lot of the neighbors say they weren't even aware that this party was happening, and yet their street was blocked off.
Right.
So that's not part of the application. I would suggest that if this application was to come up again, to make sure that somehow to get neighbors or people that live on the street notified, or for the person that's applying for it to go out and tell people.
right, well, like I said, most of the block parties, the streets that are blocked, it's not done with fencing, and that would never be approved. It's usually done with cones, And again, I like to end it at 8 o'clock. This one got by me at 9:30, 9:45.
Thank you for everything you do. Thank you, Mr.
Council.
Chairman.
Council Beauregard, followed by Cruz, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Captain DeBerry, for being here. I want to ask a couple of quick questions here. You mentioned about the calls. So am I to understand that if we wish to retrieve some information, that your IT division within the police department could let us know how many calls were made, both on what I call the business line and then on the 911 line?
Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, how do people know to apply for a block party? I mean, how would I say, I'm not planning on having one, we'll clear that up right now, but I was just curious how that takes place.
I believe they get the information through the mayor's office.
Oh, okay, all right, so there's nothing on the police website. I mean, I go on it periodically, but there's nothing that says download for, okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so then we can assume then that some people might be having what we would imagine would be defined as a block party without even realizing that they needed to apply for one.
Very possible.
Okay, because I believe we had an issue like that in Ward 5. And they were, how would I say it, going on till all hours and blocking people's driveways, et cetera. So the other part would be to all this. Are there fines that can be enforced, or any other issue if this continues, or you're called repeatedly to a particular location because of noise, people parking and, blocking people's driveways, et cetera, and creating other, how would I say, problems that are not best for the neighborhood?
Not that I'm aware of.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, through you to Council Beauregard. Myself and Council Ranieri had filed an ordinance which is going to be amending the noise ordinance. Actually, it should be on the agenda for the next council meeting, where we're giving basically, first time is going to be a warning, second time they can ticket them for $100, third time $300, something to that effect. And there's some other, I talked to Council Healy, there's some other towns that have some verbiage in there for noise. So we're going to be working on that in the next ordinance, at this next council meeting, that'll be filed. So that's going to be, hopefully, this can help things out, but we're working on that.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you. And thank you, Captain. This is what I was curious about. So in other words, people could have block parties because they had no idea that they needed to go through the mayor's office or what have you. And, okay, so this accounts for probably many of the situations we've had throughout this summer. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Council Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you, Captain DeBerry. A little bit of comment and a little bit of question. First, through you to my colleague, Council, the license that you were showing, the Chapter 138, is that a copy of the license for that day?
Yes.
Because I have to be honest with you, that confuses me and upsets me that that's what the mayor's office gave, because, no, so you got a copy of the license they gave. Captain DeBerry can tell you that we've had in Bassett Road for 20-odd years a neighborhood block party. And I think Officer Healy can probably tell you how these have started. Neighborhood block parties are neighborhood parties that essentially started with Crime Watch and Neighborhood Watch groups, and they're a phenomenal way to bring a neighborhood together. When we have ours, and we've had it for 20-odd years, we did not have it this year because I told my neighbors, we can't go down and get a permit because there's a moratorium on this right now. What happened on Myrtle Street was not a neighborhood block party. It was somebody who had a party who closed off the street and should never have been asking for that application. Unfortunately, it came to Captain DeBerry and to the fire department as a neighborhood block party. Mostly what we're really talking about are house parties that you don't need a permit for, but that you do need to behave in your neighborhood on. And the street being closed off is something that you get by. Never should you be able to have a neighborhood block party, and I believe the permit application actually has the phrase neighborhood block party in the original applications that I used to fill out. I don't know if it still does. The fact that they gave an entertainment license means that that's a license that should be, I believe, only given by the License Commission.
Well, just a point of information
Please.
to my colleague from Ward 1. There's a discrepancy in that one permit says graduation block party. Oh, I strike that. They both say graduation block party, but this one is actually issued under Chapter 136, which grants to the mayor the authority to issue these, and in the ordinances, it calls for a $120 payment of a fee. So I'm not sure why both of them were required. I'm not quite sure why both of them were issued. One is for 3 to 9 p.m., and the other one that the captain mentioned is 3 to 9:45. So let's just say the process was convoluted, is the best way to put it.
And I'm surprised and dismayed because, again, Captain DeBarry will back me up. We've had our neighborhood block party, and I've helped constituents have their neighborhood block parties for all the 12 years I've been on the city council, and they're a wonderful thing. And I've had neighbors, though, that live, constituents who lived on busy main streets, who said, "How do we do that?" And I said, "I wouldn't. You can't. The police are not going to allow you to close off West Elm Street or a street like that. It's just too dangerous. I live on a dead end, essentially. We close it off. During the daylight hours, and it's opened up, and it's open to every neighbor to come and be part of a neighborhood. This was no more a neighborhood block party. This was one person who doesn't care about their neighbors, in my opinion, and I'm sorry if they're here, I don't even know who they are, who doesn't care about their neighbors, and it's a different issue from what Councilor Ianieri and Councilor Monahan are filing. We're having problems with these parties, but those parties are happening outside of block parties. You know, the fact that this street got closed off by a fence is terrible, and it ruins the idea of what a neighborhood is. This was not a neighborhood party. I believe some of the neighbors are here. They were not part of they were not invited to share an event with their neighbor. This neighbor closed off the street of their own volition under the guise of a neighborhood block party. And the idea, and again, Officer Healy can back me up, these are great opportunities for neighborhoods to stay together and to know each other and to come out of their houses and know each other. This problem we have is less about neighborhood block parties than it is about the parties that are happening right now, and there are way too many of them, and they're too big, and we do need to put some teeth into the ordinance to give the police an opportunity to stop these, and to not take away the idea of a neighborhood block party for neighborhood watch groups, for crime watch groups, and for other church groups to do them in a safe, sharing manner with their neighbors. And I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Rodriguez, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually glad you brought that up, and I had that written in here, because I think we in this city tend to be reactionary. You know, yes, we had an issue on Myrtle Street, but as the council from Ward 1 said, that was not a block party, because I have it in good intel, Captain, that there was a cover charged to people to go to this party. There were booze being sold, and there were food being sold. So that is not a definition of a block party. So the issue here is not about having a block party, but it's the how and the type of parties that we're talking about. Because I grew up in this community back in the days with Lucky Luciano putting together the crime watches in the neighborhoods, and we used to encourage each other and the groups to come together and do these little things to bring neighbors together. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with having neighbors come together in a safe way. But this here, and I have this on good intel from one of the neighbors in that street, that this was not a block party. And I think we're basically throwing out the baby with the bathwater here because we're labeling it a block party gone wrong when in fact there was nothing but an organized, honestly, there was nothing blocking about it, to be honest with you, other than the streets that were blocked. So I think, it makes a lot of sense that we actually look into the ordinances to do, that come along with this stuff, and possibly involve within that ordinance, I know I don't sit in that committee, but to look at it perhaps where the city councilor of that particular ward has a sign off on that particular license as well, so that what happened in Myrtle and some of these other streets are not going on behind the councilor's back, the ward councilors from those wards. Because again, we need to do a little bit more in this community to bring people together. We've got a ton of people that are coming from all over the world, all over the place, and we need to figure out a way to bring them together. And I think shutting down the idea of a neighborhood block get-together on a Sunday morning, Saturday morning, Friday afternoon, or whatever the deal might be, might not be the answer to solve the issue that happened on Murder Street as well. Because again, that was not a block party. So it's not even fair for us to be sitting here calling it a block party when we know for a fact that that was not a block party. Not when you're charging somebody $20 to get in. It's like a club.
Right.
And they were selling booze, $3 for Coronas and $5 for Heinekens, and selling food. They should have done a lot more in terms of licensing than just the typical block party license. And I think that's where we failed as a city government, in the sense that, and I think Councilor Barnes brought that up, where maybe our police department could have been a little more proactive in terms of shutting that whole thing down, knowing that this was going on with some of the calls that the neighbors were making, because it was not a block party. It's like we can't have lawless in our community where somebody can just decide, I'm going to open up a bar on my own, because that's basically what that was. I'm going to open up a restaurant on my own, because that's exactly what this was. And I hope that we as an organization, we as a body, we don't overreact and try to throw out the baby with the bathwater by putting a serious restriction on the ability of neighbors coming together as neighbors because of what happened on Myrtle Street. Because again, what happened on Myrtle Street was not a block party. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Council. Follow up by Council Beauregard and then Council Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Captain DeBerry, I'm sorry, because we kept on highlighting block parties. So we also are having tremendous problems with house parties. Is there any policy or procedure that an officer takes when they arrive at a house party?
Council, I'm sorry, that's not part of the resolve relative to
I'm
house
sorry,
parties.
just because we had the overlap.
Is everybody okay with Council asking this question? Go ahead, Councilor.
Okay, thank you. It was just, to follow up, because my colleague, Councilor Cruz, mentioned too that these are, a lot of instances, house parties, or people have just decided to take on their own agenda, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if we get calls for a disturbance for a loud house party, then we go and we talk to the people having the party. If it continues, we shut it down. Like I said, we've always used the old, 3 strikes you're out. And you can actually, court complaint, charge criminally the owner of the house.
Okay, thank you. Is there any, time of the day that you're more strict about this?
Yeah, anybody can be disturbed at any point.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Council Cruz, please.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on, and the reason I was so interested in what license you had a copy of, Councilor Farwell, is this was a violation of the liquor license laws. That's what if they're charging drinks, this was somebody who should have applied for a one-day liquor license, which of course you can't do for a non-organization anyways, but that's what this was a violation of the liquor laws, and the fines and the punishment for that homeowner should be on those lines, which are fairly strict, and which are, I believe, and again, that's where the enforcement needs to be. I mean, this person, in my opinion, under false pretenses, applied for a block party, which again, in my opinion, entails the neighborhood, but block party, when what they did was they illegally opened a one-day liquor license, and that's where the punishment needs to be. And we do need to get the chief in here to talk to, because I think I've heard rumors that this is happening at more places more often, so we do need to get the chief in here to talk about that.
And Counselor, just to follow up on that, if they're selling food, that's a Board of Health violation as well, so.
As well, so again, we have some ordinances that were violated that night, at least allegedly, I can't say they were, but we do need to get, those are enforcement issues, and not enforcement issues from Captain DeBarry's department, but from the License Commission and the Board of Health. Thank you.
Counselor Fowler, you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, and maybe I'll mention the old expression, the elephant in the room. I think what happened, because I've been out on the street, is that the police went there and they saw 2 licenses signed by the mayor, and they probably said to themselves, I'm not getting involved in the middle of this. So I think we got a little bit permissive, and I think things got out of control, and I don't think anyone went into the backyard to see if there was alcohol being served, and that's not right. I mean, if we set standards for any license or any event, and those standards aren't being met, then all of us in this room, even if they don't get the backing somewhere else, all of us in this room should back the police so that they can get down there and say, no, you're not living up to what we've told you you've got to do, and this thing is going to be put under control, and we're going to come back and check periodically. And I will say, I think it goes back to that consistent, fair, but level of accountability that you have to bring to these different things. And lastly, I would say to my colleague from Ward 1, I think the only reason we're throwing around block party, and I agree with you, you don't want to punish good people who get together with their group. It's only because it's on the license.
Oh, I agree.
I think we just, the terminology just got generated from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor, I do want to take the time to thank Attorney Nazarella and Captain DeBarry for coming here. There was 4 people invited. This is a very, very important issue. You gentlemen should be applauded for joining us tonight. The other 2 should be here tonight. Counselor Yaneri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Captain, too, for answering the questions and being present here. And I know Attorney Nazarella, I just have one question for you. I'd just like to have some clarification, because I know and I've already seen the ordinance that's going to be presented to the City Council, and I don't know if it's already been put before us to be at our next meeting or not. I know it's being signed off by the former Chief Stadinsky, but I think what that's going to do is put a little bit of, bite into what we've got going on here, because it's going to be sent this type of situation. I don't think it's going to be known as even a block party. I think it's going to have a different title name to it from what the mayor explained that evening. So this way here, if it's gone to the License Commission, that's where he wants it to go. The ordinance to send these such things would be through the License Commission. And with License Commission having agents, means that they're going to go out and be able to check on these parties, just as if it is some type of other situation. Just like when we have a problem with noise at the fairgrounds, who do myself and the council from Ward 2 call, with the chairman of the License Commission, and tell them to send up the people to check out what's going on. So just enlighten me to that. I think that's what this ordinance is going to do, and I want the other members here to realize that as well.
Well, that's correct. As a result of this incident, there's been extreme focus on the process, which has been a historical process in the city of Brockton. Right. As Captain DeBarry said, the application goes to the fire department, the police department, and the mayor's office, as a perfunctory matter, signs off on the information provided from the police and the fire department. After we have focused on this issue, we had determined that it would be in the best interest of the public that it be a public hearing through a license commission, where the public will get notice, the ward councilors will get notice, they can vet out whatever issues they have, and a different type of analysis can be given. And the police will be supported, encouraged, and reminded that they have the authority on the scene at site to close the situation down if they believe a public safety issue arises. Correct. Or may arise. So they're given broader, wider latitude and encouraged to exercise that as well. Hopefully, an incident that got completely unraveled and out of control, and as clearly and accurately stated, missed the intent of what it was supposed to be, that should not reoccur again.
Exactly. And the situation of the other parties, that's something that needs to be kind of under control of the police department, which is something we need to talk to the chief about, just as my other colleagues have mentioned. So, with that being said, I'm going to move that we postpone this item so that we can have the chief here at our next finance meeting in September He's not present for the next item as well, and he still needs to come in for that one. And I would hope that he would be here, because it's sort of like a little bit of a slap to us as the legislative body when we invite department heads to talk, to work with them, to come up with resolutions. We're not here to beat everybody up, we're not here to do that, but we're here to work together. Everyone's telling me under this new, I'm out there campaigning, we need to all work together. Yeah, we need to work together, all of us. We need to all come together. So I'm postponing this till the next meeting in September in hopes that he will be here so we can discuss this with him in a further in depth, because I think, we just want some other answers. Thank you.
I second that.
On the motion, Councilor, Councilor Ianieri, do you think that we could remove Captain DeBerry from the invited guests?
Exactly. We need the mayor, we need the chief of police.
Okay, so Attorney Nezzarella and Captain can be relieved from this.
I think so.
Madam Clerk, if you could just note that when you do the invites. So motion on the floor, properly seconded, to postpone this matter until when, Councilor Ianieri?
Our finance meeting in September.
Yes, September Finance Committee. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Thank you very much, Attorney and Captain.
Thank you.
Number 21, please.
Resolve to invite Brockton Police Chief, Mr. John Crowley, to discuss operations of the department to the City Council. Invited, John Crowley, Chief, Brockton Police Department.
Council, before we get into this, let me just say a couple things as the chairman, and I said this as the president of the council for the budget hearings, and you might all remember I was pretty ticked off when two chairmen of boards, it was the Planning Board and Conservation Board, decided not to even appear before us, and they sent Mr. May, and I said how really pathetic that is. This is worse, that the police chief did not even reach out to me as a professional courtesy to explain. I mean, I'll give it to the mayor, at least he sent me an email, albeit it was at 4:05 PM when City Hall closes 25 minutes later, knowing that this agenda's been sitting around. Connie did it about a month ago, I mean, for God's sake. So this is very disheartening. There's definitely a disconnect, because as long as Councilor Ianieri, Cruz, myself, Stadinsky have been on it, we've always had Bill Conlon, Manny Gomes, reaching out to us, calling us. This isn't happening, and I'll be very frank. I haven't heard from John Crowley all year as president of the council. So just remember that when we invite this person, we hope that he will appear. He has great men and women that work for him, put their lives on the line. But when he doesn't appear, it ticks me off personally as a taxpayer and as someone that's very much in love with the city of Brockton, and I can speak for all of you saying this, but this is upsetting to me that I didn't even get an email or a phone call, which is probably the best way to do it. Councilor Beauregard.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was going to ask if you had heard from the chief. I also did not hear from the chief, and I filed the resolve. We file these resolves because our constituents have concerns. Last month, the chief was in front of us, but it was not our policy to vote for his approval as he's appointed by the mayor. Now, having said that, I had, listed out several questions. Since then, like many of my colleagues, they have received some frustrations and have informed them of their constituents' frustrations with the police in certain matters. And I believe that, like yourself, that the police chief should be here to answer, because he is the appointed leader of our police department in one of the largest cities in the Commonwealth. Now, having said that, I guess we're going to ask him, and we'll postpone this to be at the first finance meeting in September, if the only finance meeting in September.
Second.
Motion on the floor, properly seconded.
On the motion?
On the motion.
Just a question through you to the staff. When did the invitations go out?
2 weeks ago, right?
2.5 weeks.
Approximately.
2.5 weeks ago.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
At least. It might have even been 3 weeks when I approved it, so.
That's close enough. Thank you.
So motion on the floor, postpone this. It's been properly seconded. Postpone until the only meeting in September. All in favor? All opposed? It's postponed to the Finance Committee in September, please.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Councilor.
On item 22, you may remember that I asked, because we had a fairly aggressive agenda this evening, that we postpone this. I did back warn Mr. May, so he would not prepare. So I'd like to move to postpone this to a Finance Committee meeting in October.
You're going to waive the reading on this, Councilor?
Excuse me?
Are you waiving the reading on this? Hasn't been read?
I'm sorry, yes, waiving reading and asking that it be postponed to a Finance Committee meeting in October, and further that Mr. Jenkins from the Redevelopment Authority be invited to appear as well, because the BRA is our agent for the Downtown Urban Renewal Project.
The motion on the floor, properly second, to waive the reading and to postpone agenda item 22 until the first FinCom in October, and also inviting Mr. Jenkins. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries. Madam Clerk, if we can just remember to invite Robert Jenkins as well. As I said, 23, we got notice from Ms. Martineau that she wouldn't be coming here. Councilor Beauregard, this is your resolve.
Yes, thank you. I filed the resolve because we're running into many retired individuals, Brockton employees, and they have some questions, and I thought it would be best if we had the new director of the Brockton Employees Retirement Board, so if we could possibly postpone this to the first Finance Committee meeting in September.
And you want to waive the reading on this one?
Yes, thank you.
Motion on the floor to waive the reading and to postpone this until the only Finance Committee meeting in September. All in favor? All opposed? That motion carries, Madam Clerk. We have
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I hate to go out of order, but something just actually came to me, and I'd like to ask Councilor Beauregard through you. Is there any kind of indication of a lot of people retiring between now and fiscal September?
I'm sorry, through the
Quarter?
chair, to my colleague here, this was really not about people that are planning on retiring in the next few months, even though I'm sure that would be advantageous to them. It was when I found, when I was, knocking on doors, that some of the people that still live in Brockton that are retired had questions and a little confusion about different changes with all, the laws we see and the fears with health insurance and those changes and challenges. So that's why I felt by having her come up here, she might be able to inform them if there's workshops, et cetera, any other information they'd have accessibility to.
As we recall, she did come before us for budget. She was new, relatively new. She offered to come here. She sent an email to myself and Mel and Connie, profusely apologizing for not being able to come tonight. So,
Okay, thank you. I apologize for the disruption.
nope, not at all. So we're good on that one. And we have two last resolves to complete the agenda tonight, which would be 24 and 25. Madam Clerk.
Resolve to invite Royal Motors of 27 Fright Street, Unit C, Brockton, Mass., to address issues concerning hours of business and business procedures. Invited, Joseph Alabrani, owner.
Hello. I filed this resolve too. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it gets a little convoluted, so if everyone can indulge me for a moment. Okay. There is a building on Freight Street, 27 Freight Street, which has 3 units. This gentleman, Joseph Alabrandi, is the owner of Fitness Motors. He was invited this evening, but as we were speaking, the city clerk and myself and the proprietor, he has been in business in Brockton since 1999, and he is a well-respected business person and has many return customers, and there have been no reports or complaints. The confusion became because of the various unit letters, and Royal Motors was operating, and as of July, they closed their business, and new owners are now in the process of, rearranging and cleaning the premises, and they are working very closely with our city clerk to adhere to all the regulations that are part of the policies in this city. And I imagine we will be seeing them in the next month to come for public safety and in front of our city council. So I would like to thank everyone that helped resolve this, because I worked closely with our council and the city clerk and the individuals that have done a great business in the city for many years, and we just hope that he will continue to do so, and we look forward to another business working closely with this community and adhering to the regulations. Thank you.
Council, is it your will that you want to table this matter, or what do you want to do with this matter?
No, I just feel that if we can file this favorably, move this favorably, I'm sorry.
Second. On the motion?
Councilor.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, since Mr. Alabrandi has nothing to do with Royal Motors, may I suggest that somehow we remove his name completely from this agenda item, because I don't think it's fair to link him to Royal Motors when he's not the owner.
Has that closing occurred? He's no longer the owner of record?
Oh, no, he was never
never
the
owned
owner
it
of
at
Rolling
all.
Motors. No,
Oh, all
he
right,
is
yeah.
the successful
The
owner
parliamentary
of Fitness
procedure,
Motors.
he's
yes.
only, the invitation is not part of the order, so you wouldn't need to remove him. He is not part of any record.
We can, going forward, if you make a favorable recommendation back to full council on this one, we can just make sure that for Scrivener error purposes, that would be, the invited guest would be struck in its entirety.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just, sorry.
Council Bonds.
Mr. Chairman, through to Ward 5 Councilor, I mean, even if it kind of goes through favorably, it's a negative resolve. It's to bring folks forward for faulty business practices. So wouldn't it be in our best interest, and I guess, not to besponge or mess up the new people for that new area, just to table it? Because it's concerning business practices and hours. That's, I don't want to vote favorably on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you, Council. That's why I asked you if it was your will to table it. I mean, my humble recommendation would be to table this matter, or if you want to send it back and then refile or resolve addressing the correct owners of record, you could do that as well. But right now, to send this back, and it's up to you, Council, you drafted it.
I feel, no, what I wanted to do was imply that this has been resolved.
The matter itself has
It's
been resolved, so it's a moot point now.
Moot point,
So
thank
it
you.
need not go back to the council to even address it on our agenda. You may table it, and it will sit on the table, and it will
Okay.
die at the end of December.
Okay, then that's what we'll do.
Is
We'll
that the
vote to
form of a
table it.
motion?
Yes, thank you.
Remove my second.
Motion's been made, properly seconded to table. All in favor?
Tabled.
All opposed. Matter is tabled, and it will stay on the table, Counselor.
Thank you.
We will go on to the last agenda item of the evening. Thank you. 25, please.
Resolve to invite the owners of International Auto Works and Lubra Auto Body of 62-64 Elliott Street, Brockton, Mass., to address issues concerning hours of business and business procedures. Invited Antonio Amato, owner, International Auto Works; Emmanuel Vincente, owner, Lubra Auto Body.
Gentlemen, are you here tonight? Are you in the
Yes.
chamber?
They are, Mr. Chair, and I'm the one that filed the resolve again on this issue.
Okay, Counselor. The invited guest, Mr. Amato, Mr. Vincente, if you're here, please come up to the podium. Who are you, sir? Who are you? What's your name?
Emmanuel Vicente.
Okay. Is Mr. Amato here?
No.
Excuse me? No?
No, it's me.
Mr. Chair, is it all right, too, if Mr. Gomes comes? He's the landlord for the building.
Does anybody have any objection?
No.
No objection.
Please come forward. Please state your name for the record, if you could, and your address.
My name is Orlando Gomes. I live at 73 Cleary Drive in Stoughton, Massachusetts.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Counsel, this is your resolve.
Yes, if I could proceed, I would like to allow Mr. Gomes to speak first. He is the landlord of the Elliott Street location, 62 and 64, where many individuals and many of my constituents and other constituents have complained about frustrations. Now, it becomes, again, rather confusing because there's two businesses within that building. So this is why we've invited both of them to come this evening. Now, we have not heard at all from the owner of Lubra Auto Body. Mr. Gomes will explain what has transpired since. And the gentleman, Antonio Armando, is with International Auto Works, and I believe we'll let Mr. Gomes explain his, how would I say, the story behind all this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Clear it up.
Mr. Gomes, good evening.
Good evening. The story behind all this, I rent this place to Mr. Vicente a while back. But the reason I rented to him is because he used to work for me. And when we first built that building in 2006, he knew the rules and regulation that was put on by Michelle. I explained to him, I said, if you're not going to obey these rules, I cannot rent it to you. He agrees to obey the rules. It's been the past 3 months. Tell him, we call him Tose. Tose, this place is not getting cleaned up. You got to clean it up. My insurance came down. They tried to cancel my insurance because it's not getting cleaned up. I've been trying for the past since May with the insurance is not getting cleaned up. So I don't know what to do. Last thing I decided in my mind to do is give him a notice to quit because I gotta take that building back. It's not being run properly. It has nothing to do with International Auto. International Auto used sometime part of my building what I own in Main Street to park cars when he's overload. But then they're not listening. I go there, it's cars everywhere.
Just to be clear for the council, this Mr. Amato, is he International Auto?
No, he's a Lubra's Auto Body.
Wait a minute.
So it's a mistake here?
What Antonio Amato is?
International Auto it's Antonio Amato. This is Emmanuel Vicente, which is Lubra's Auto.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that's correct then, right?
Okay,
The
yes.
way it is? Okay.
And I have the notice here I gave him. If he's not gonna clean up by the end of this month, I want my building back. If he's not gonna be my building back in an easy way, I'm gonna take him to court because it's not going right. Then if that building catches on fire, I have no insurance on it because of the fact it's not.
Yeah, this is like a landlord-tenant issue. I don't
No, I
feel
realize
comfortable
this.
speaking about this in the chamber because it's, do you have a lease? A written
No,
lease?
this is a tenant to will.
Okay, I mean,
What is this?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, could I raise a point of information if Councilor Cruz doesn't mind?
No, go ahead.
I think, just based on what we've heard, my suggestion would be that the council president ask the police chief and the fire chief to get down and do an inspection of that property. From what he's describing, we need things cleaned up. There could be a hazardous material issue. I don't think we're prepared tonight to do much of anything other than to ask for code enforcement to go out and examine that property and find out exactly what's going on, because we don't have enforcement powers, and it just seems to me things aren't right there.
yeah, I concur with you. I don't think we have much to go on other than get information tonight. I echo the sentiments of you. I don't know what the gist of the resolve was, but I know other councilors may have some questions. But from what you're explaining to me as the lawful owner of the record, it's a landlord-tenant issue, but it does have a detrimental impact on the lives of the people that live and work around that area. So, Councilor, it's up to you, but if you want some of the other councilors to ask questions, but I do think that the suggestion made is appropriate. We don't, as a legislative body, have much to do tonight.
No, I realize that. The reason that this was filed
Yes.
was because the police officers have gone down there before, but there has not been enough code enforcement. And there's a neighbor here tonight that has, contacted me about her frustrations that cars are blocking her driveway, et cetera. There's overflow. My colleague here has gone down Elliott Street and hasn't been able to make it completely down because they're repairing cars in the middle of the road.
It happened to me last week.
Yes. So this is why I wanted because we were receiving no replies from the owner that has been creating all these problems and safety hazards, that he come tonight just to inform us that he is taking steps in the right direction. So yes, I concur with my colleague. I would be very happy, and I believe that the owner would be too, to have both someone from the police and the fire to address the other safety concerns. Thank you.
Councilor Ezek, do you have a question?
Yes.
And then Councilor Barnes does. Okay,
Thank you,
Councilor.
Mr. Chairman. And I just have a few questions. One to Mr. Gomes. Now, I know my colleague mentioned that he would want code enforcement, police, or fire to go down there. I can't imagine they haven't in the last few years, because this matter has been coming up before City Council since State Rep Dubois was here, which is, I think we're going on 3 years or so. So have you had visits from the police or code enforcement? Because we do have code enforcement, and they...
It's a code enforcement went down there a couple of times, and they tell them to clean up, and they clean up a little bit to just enough for the code enforcements. But then the next day, is a bunch of cars back on the road again.
Yes.
And I go by there, and it's cars everywhere.
And I go by there at least 3 times a day.
People and the neighbors calls me because they know me. I've been in the city of Brockton since 2000.
So...
And it's not getting taken care of.
Okay, so does your tenant understand the law, the regulations that his license is issued? I mean, does Mr. Vicente, do you know what the rules that you're supposed to follow? Do you know you can't repair vehicles in the middle of a road, that you can't park things on each side?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm very uncomfortable here, Mr. Chairman. We have a right to have a hearing.
Right.
And to take the license away.
Right.
But the the
Right.
licensee has many
Right.
rights to
Procedural.
that, procedural rights.
Right.
To it be a public hearing, to have an
Yes.
attorney here.
Yes.
This is not really, in all due respect, I understand the frustration the councilor has in filing this, but this is, I believe, improper, that what we're doing right now, and I think if need be, we can work with the police to, we can take the license away, but there's a process to do it, and I think we could get ourselves in some trouble with that, with the due process of that license holder if we continue to speak about him without him here, and again, it's a...
Well, he is here,
No,
right?
they are here, both of the
No,
people that we
no, the
mentioned.
license holder that you want to take the license away is not here.
He is not here?
No,
Who's the,
We don't even know who...
he
what-
is here, he's right there, he said he was. This is Mr., this is the one that owns Lubra Auto Body. Correct.
So do we, as a point of parliamentary inquiry, do we even know what license and what license holder?
As of right now, it's strictly a resolve for informational gathering. That's all, was what I was told.
Yes.
If we want to postpone this matter, which I think we probably should, we're going down the wrong path, I think we should do that. I don't know if you, as the ward council, have been able to sit down with these people or not, but we can have the city clerk involved, we can do
Point
what
of
Council
information.
Falwell had requested as well.
Point of information, this part of Elliott Street is in Ward 6.
Okay, Ward
no, I
6.
realize.
Have you sat down with these people? Do you know these people?
No, I've not sat down with them. I've gotten code enforcement calls, I've called code enforcement and things like that before. But let me just get this straight. You're the landlord, you're the tenant that is, this is the tenant that is obeying the rules.
It's not obeying the rules. It's not obeying the rules, it's not keeping the...
Not obeying the rurules. Okay, so both tenants are not obeying the rules.
Mr. Amato, you told us, Mr. Amato is only using parking space, right?
My space, yes.
Right, parking space, exterior parking space.
Yes.
He's not here tonight. Mr.
No.
Vincente is here tonight.
Yes, Vicente is here.
And he uses the interior of the complex, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Amato uses the interior complex too, but the one side. But he only has license for 9 cars. When he has more than 9 cars, whatever he has over the limit, he brings it over to my building on Main Street.
As Chair, I'm going to, thank you very much, Mr. Gomez. As Chair, I'm going to make a recommendation, we postpone this matter. We need to get our due diligence together, we need to know who are the license holder. If there's 2 tenants in there, they both license holder, what's the basis of it?
Move to postpone.
I have a question,
Second.
though.
Well, then you have to say on the motion under parliamentary procedure then. So you're on the motion?
Okay, on the motion, Mr. Gomes, if I understood him correctly, said that if his building burns up today, he has no insurance. That is, I think that might be something that we can act on as a council to get code in there and
No, we
even lock
can't,
it up
Council.
tonight.
Council, we have no ability as a legislative body to deal with someone's personal insurance on his or her commercial or residential property.
But
We don't
what's our
have any basis for
responsibility
that.
for neighborhood safety? If that,
We
right
call
next
code
door, the
enforcement
building went
tomorrow.
up.
We tell, as, you know, as the ward counselor
But
across
if he
the
has no
street,
insurance on the
and as the
building,
counselors
No, I
at
have
large,
insurance at the
we
moment, I have
call
insurance. But
and make
it's in
sure
process
that
to
hold
they
on,
cancel
so many
it.
people talking.
Councilors, this is my recommendation as chair. You can take it or leave it. I would recommend that as the committee, chairman of the finance committee, we send this back to full city council. City council can then send it to public safety. We cannot send it from a committee to a committee. It makes no sense to talk about this tonight in an open forum when we don't have all the facts. The purpose of the resolve, according to what I was told, was it was information gathering purposes. We're on a slippery slope here where there's some legal parameters being discussed. We can't talk about it. We don't have the authority to talk about it. A lot of it is beyond the realm of our ability, talking about insurance of a commercial property. We don't have that ability. I understand you're talking about safety and potential fire, but it's on you as the owner of the property to get the insurance in place. So that's my suggestion as chair, take it or leave it.
Just a point of information. Can we take your recommendation but still put in a formal request to have police and fire inspect that property?
Absolutely, but this is becoming a public safety issue, potentially from what we heard tonight. And again, the finance committee is really, your purpose was to get information, correct?
Yes, yes.
So if that, Mr. Chairman, if that's in a form of a motion, I'm going to second your motion.
There's a motion on the floor that has to be withdrawn first.
Which one was that?
Nobody made a motion yet, did he?
Yeah, there was
It would have to go
Oh,
back.
the motion before.
It would have to go back to the full council,
Yes.
and then once it gets to the council, which would be next week, the 28th, At that
And we can
time,
bounce
within the
it out.
council, you could decide to send it back to public safety, which I think is the appropriate venue and the
Yeah, I
appropriate
think so.
committee under the legislative body. Is there a motion to send it back?
Motion to send it back.
Second.
A favorable recommendation?
Favorable recommendation.
It's a favorable recommendation to send it back to full council. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Just so you understand this, the intent as of tonight, we sent it back to full city council. All of us sit on the city council, right? This is just a finance committee, a subcommittee of the full city council. Next Monday night, we'll take it up again relative to sending it to another potential committee, which would be public safety. Public safety is chaired by Mr. Farwell over there. He would call a public safety committee hearing. It would be on the docket. You would have to come, if you choose to, at that time, to further discuss it. But feel free to talk to the ward council, Mr. Lally, right there. And again, you could speak to Ms. Beauregard as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
That's
you.
clear? Thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Anything else before us tonight? Council, just want to tell you, I'm not going to be here Monday night, so Council Ianieri has graciously said he's going to fill in as president. So good luck, Dennis. Have a good night, everybody.